Chapter 12:24. After River Styx left, the primeval Lord of Heaven spoke to Taishang Dao. Lord, why did you betroth Pangu to him? River Styx is up to no good. Not long after he came to the chaotic world, he has already caused countless troubles. He is a famous troublemaker. Don't forget the last time he used the monkey to commit murder. I could tell that he is a troublemaker. If he has Pangu's origin, he will be lawless. Taishang sighed. We made him the leader of the demonic sect and forced Ro to give him the karma of the demonic path. Isn't it just to let him cause trouble? Ro's demonic path focuses too much on destruction and self-indulgence. We set up the mystic door to oppose the demonic path in order to conform to the principle of yin and yang coexisting. Didn't we deduce that without the demonic path, the mystic door would be a pool of stagnant water? One declines and one grows, that is the existence of Tao. The continuation of the mystic door is also in prosperity and decline. The opposite is the movement of Tao, the weak is the use of Tao. How can there be a Tao orthodoxy that never declines? When it is prosperous, it flourishes. When it is weak, it hides opportunities, leaving room for growth. It looks weak, but it is full of vitality. When it is strong, it will become rigid and weak. When it is weak, it can maintain vigorous vitality. It looks weak, but it is closer to Tao. The battle between Tao and demonic path was in Taishang's words. The opposite is the movement of Tao. Without the demonic path that was opposite to the mystic door, there was no opposite, no cycle between Tao and demonic path, the use of yin and yang, then the mystic door could only continue to develop. It looked prosperous, but in reality, without the opposite, it would not move. Without moving, it would become rigid, rotten, and lose its initiative. Taishang advocated the virtue of water, flow, inaction, change, and change. Of course, he would not see his mystic door develop like this. The principle was the same for Buddhism. It needed the temptation, disturbance, and test of the demonic path to understand the truth. He had never heard of a son of Buddha attaining Tao without any calamities or tribulations, without the disturbance of the extraterrestrial demons, and without the obstruction of the devil path. The mystic door needed to be weak, it needed the Tao to move. As for the Buddhist sects, they needed the demonic path as their opponent. They needed to constantly experience tribulations to hone their Zen heart and attain enlightenment. Even more so than the mystic door, he needed the path of diabolism. In a deeper level of Buddhism, Buddha and demon were one. Only the 3 poisons and 8 sufferings could serve as a contrast to the true awareness. If there was no greed, ignorance, or anger, how could one comprehend the true awareness? Therefore, Luoho quit his job. Daozu and Gautama Buddha were anxious. Although the demonic path had some talents, none of them could oppose Gautama Buddha and Daozu. If this continued, the demonic path would weaken, while the mystic door and the Buddhist path would prosper. Moreover, it would be difficult for them to take a step back and make room for change, and the vitality of their orthodoxies would decline. The few great divines were so anxious for the demonic path that their hair turned white. On the contrary, Dara of the demonic path did not care about the other demon monarchs. All of them had a high status in the Buddhist path of the mystic door. Who asked the mystic door to be so vast, and the Buddhist path liked to subdue external demons and then serve them as protectors or deliverance, promising to attain Tao in a certain year and a certain month. The demonic path was particular about a crafty rabbit having 3 burrows. In the recent prehistoric eras, the Taoists grew stronger and the demons disappeared. The Dharma was boundless, subduing all demons, causing them to be unable to mingle in the righteous path. The weakening of the demonic path had affected the birth of the new Dara of the Buddhist and Taoist sections. As a matter of fact, Lord Taishang had thought of ways to find a potential member of the demonic path from the outside. He was Chun Wuliang, the clone of cult master Chun, the creator of the demon ancestor of all beings, the ancestor River Styx, who had deceived the entire Buddhist path in the world of Shu and cut off the Tao of Psyche, had come to the prehistoric world to establish a base and develop the demonic path. Now it seemed that the ancestor River Styx had indeed deeply understood the true meaning of the movement of Tao. He always had a strong desire for research and destruction, and was full of evil vitality. With him around, although the entire demonic path would grow crooked, the mystic door and the Buddhist path would definitely make a move. The appearance of River Styx's inextinguishable divine aura was that of a vigorous youth, completely different from the gloomy middle-aged Taoist dressed in a black robe and a long beard, who was dressed in a long black robe, as the cult master of River Styx. Ro's demonic path was gloomy like his Dharmakaya, and could even be said to be gloomy, full of sharp murderous intent. Although this could not represent anything, it could more or less reveal something. Ro's demonic path had entered middle age and declined. He had a sinister and cunning temperament, full of endless resentment and murderous intent. On the other hand, River Styx's demonic path was full of vigor, not the resentment and stubbornness of the traditional demonic path. Instead, he deviated from the traditional path, was changeable and cunning, and leaned towards evil. One was evil and the other was evil. This was the biggest difference between the two. When the youthful River Styx came out of the Three Pure Ones' place, he saw the newbie abundant treasures. His master, Lord Lingbao Tianzuan, had temporarily gone offline and given his account to senior brother Taishang to run. Currently, the Three Pure Ones were the heavenly primogenitor, Lord Taishang Daoist, and Lord Taishang Laojun, who was Lingbao's Daoist body normally. Because he was the most idle of the Three Pure Ones, Lord Lingbao liked to use the name Cult Master Tongtian. His Taoist body of the Three Pure Ones was often left there, becoming a clay idol with no sense of existence. However, his alternate account was very active. Putting aside the famous Cult Master Tongtian, the Lord of Yu was also active. Lord Taoist Yu Chen was usually more active in the later stages, and sometimes he even used the alternate account Lord Taoist Yu Chen. He had also used alternate accounts such as Qi Du, Cult Master Dongxian, Emperor of Heaven, True Sovereign, Nine Heavens Great Emperor, Five Calamities Spiritual Masters, and so on. Great Heavenly Venerable Lingbao was more active during the Five Calamities, which were the Five Calamities of Eternal Peace, Dragon Han, Crimson Light, Founding Emperor, and High Emperor. This was a great Heavenly Venerable who was quiet while his alternate accounts were more active. There were a total of 36 transformations and 72 transformations. Abundant treasures. River Styx saw abundant treasures, who looked younger than him, and immediately threatened him with a stern face. Call me senior uncle. I'm also Pangu River Styx spiritual master now. We are one generation apart. Abundant Treasures said honestly, Senior Uncle River Styx. River Styx clenched his fingers, wanting to take some spiritual light from Abundant Treasure's body through the exchange of chi activities. However, Abundant Treasure's inextinguishable spiritual light was like clear, formless water. It slid through River Styx's fingers, leaving nothing behind. River Styx raised his head to look at this seemingly pure but actually slippery human. He sighed and said, Senior Uncle sees that you are a talent. Why don't you join me in the Blood Sea Great Tao? In the future, Senior Uncle will definitely grant you a bright future. Duobao smiled very innocently. He opened his big watery eyes and said, Really? Senior Uncle River Styx? Your teacher has really held you back. Now that the primordial world has reached Dara, there is no way out. It is said that a few primordial eras ago, Pangu's spiritual master created the karma rank of the origin above Dara. Abundant Treasures nodded and said, Teacher created 9 karma ranks of the origin. His original intention was that there were 3,000 Dara, and each had their own thoughts, which led to the chaos of the heavenly Tao. Therefore, he set up 9 sages of the heavenly Tao above Dara to represent the will of the heavenly Tao. River Styx sneered and said, "What represent the will of the heavenly Tao? The primordial world was created by Dara, and Pangu was the lord of creation, so Dara is the will of the heavenly Tao. The 3,000 chaotic gods and demons became the heavenly Tao through Pangu, and the 3,000 Dara's will is the will of the heavenly Tao. However, your 3 teachers felt that 3,000 Dara was too many, and it was too chaotic for everyone to have a vote. Therefore, they created 9 heavenly Tao karma ranks that represented Dara to represent the heavenly Tao on behalf of Dara. The poor 3,000 Dara were represented just like that." River Styx asked again, "Then why was it cancelled later?" Abundant Treasures said, "Later, in the Pangu era, the 3 teachers discovered that after the establishment of the origin, Dara only focused on the origin, wanting to advance. Because there was a path ahead, they no longer guarded the weak and moved the Tao. Every one of them maintained their strongest state, causing too many conflicts in the primordial world. At the same time, there were nearly 3,000 Dara, all staring at those positions. Although the primordial world was big, it couldn't accommodate 3,000 immortal, eternal, and Dara who wanted to advance. At that time, the teachers regretted it. There shouldn't be a path above Dara." River Styx agreed. Once there was a path to advance, Dara would have a goal. With a goal, it would want to level up. If it wanted to level up, it would level up endlessly. It would lose the weakness of guarding the weak, and lose the heart of the game. Then, Dara would not play alt accounts. If it did not play alt accounts, it would only think about leveling up through the main account. 3,000 main accounts would force the alt accounts to run out of space. Think about the terrifying scene of 3,000 Dara at its peak. Would there still be space left for people to live? 3,000 Dara main accounts were enough to squeeze the entire server until there was no space. The players who played the scenery would get involved in PK, the players who played the plot would have to go to the instance dungeon, and the players who played the squirrel would encounter many main account PK while collecting items. This was like the old server suddenly raising the level limit. All the main accounts became active. Then, would there still be a way for the alt accounts and newbies to survive? Then, there would be no new blood in this server, and it would become an old server for old players. Although the server was big, it could not accommodate 3,000 active players with main accounts. On the contrary, the current situation, there was no path above Dara. There was no more heavenly path sage or path of origin to provide leveling up. Everyone was Dara. Under equal circumstances, they could not walk the path of the predecessors. There was indeed space ahead, but that was the path taken by others. Was there anything above Dara? There was. Above Dara, there was primeval beginning, there was Daoda, there was Lingbao, there was Sakyamuni, there was Emperor Wa and Emperor Shi, there was Hudu Imperial Heaven, there was Tai Yi Hu, there was Hong Di Chaos. These people could be said to be Dara, or they could all be said to be above Dara. However, they only represented themselves. There was primeval beginning above Dara, but to walk the path of primeval beginning to prove primeval beginning? That was only the path of the Heavenly Lord of primeval beginning. To walk his path, to prove primeval beginning, and to treat him as Tao. This could indeed improve one step further, but what was the difference between this and the Heavenly Lord of primeval beginning having an incarnation? If a path was established above Dara, and everyone went to prove primeval beginning and walked up the fixed path, it would seem that there was a direction for mediocre people. However, if such people gave them a direction, it would be a bad thing. They would only focus on leveling up. They wanted to jump out of the primeval world, upgrade the universe, and increase their level. The entire primeval world would enter a period of prosperity. What would happen after that? In this world, how could there be a development direction that would not decline? It was better to stop at Dara and reach the end of the Tao. After that, everyone would prove their own path. There was no path ahead, and they had to live their own path. The primeval world was so big, why did everyone have to level up according to the same template? The primeval world was also so small. Dara was weak, so that others could develop and even survive. River Styx used spiritual light to draw a cultivation curve in the air. Before Dara, it was going up. It was getting stronger and stronger, and it maintained a state of growth. It was squeezing and developing in all directions. Once it reached a certain point, if it continued to develop without limit, it would squeeze the space of the other living beings in the primeval world. It would bring rigidity and decay. Everyone would go into seclusion for a period of time, thinking about leveling up and accumulating the power to level up. Everyone was expanding and adding. This would bring more and more pressure to the entire universe. It was not in terms of resources, but in terms of space, space for development, space for survival. River Styx deduced what would happen once the space for Dara to level up was opened and the template for leveling up was found. There would be a group of Dara thinking, searching, and pursuing leveling up all the time. Once someone succeeds, everyone will take a step forward, and then they will squeeze each other's space for development. In the end, when they realize that there is not enough space, they will kill each other. This has nothing to do with resources, but the problem of dominance. As long as there are more than 5 dominant powers in a world, there will be friction between them. Under such circumstances, levels are dominants. The higher levels dominate the lower levels. This natural dominance and status will undoubtedly erupt when the lower levels try their best to level up. Therefore, it is better for everyone to be equal. The top mighty beings do not seek to level up, nor do they pursue expansion and prosperity. Instead, they rise and fall, following the cycle of life. It is not that they do not develop, but they do not develop in the way of expansion and leveling up. This is definitely Lao-Tzu's philosophy, to guard the weak. The stronger one is, the more they have to learn to retreat. The retreat of power is for the space for development again, for more agility and vitality, for continuous maintenance of vitality and development. Before Dara, one had to move forward with an indomitable will. There were no regrets on the path of Tao. After Dara, one had to learn to be arrogant and have regrets, to keep variables for oneself, to learn to retreat with large strides. This was Lao-Tzu's Tao. Before Dara, there were no regrets in seeking Tao. After Dara, there was eternal freedom. River Styx exclaimed. The Tao of morality is indeed profound. That is why the great mediums in Dara do not have a fixed realm. If there is a symbol, it should be Pangu. Those who have proven themselves to be Pangu are usually great divines who are stronger than ordinary Grand Luo, but there's no lack of powerful people like Shakyamuni who haven't proven himself to be Pangu. Pangu transforms 9 times in a day and has 81 forms. That is to say, there are 81 positions for Pangu's Dharma idol, but not every position is occupied. Generally speaking, the ancestors who have been Pangu will keep a fixed Dharma idol to represent their Pangu position, and the rest of the unoccupied Dharma idols will be used by the previous Pangu as their incarnation. The 3 pure ones definitely kept more than 10 Dharma of Pangu. After all, they represent the 3 original ancestral chi, so it is not difficult for them to transform into 10 forms. The 3 pure ones promised me a Dharma of Pangu, which means that my chaotic fiend god body will turn into ancestral chi and become a part of Pangu. Then, when Pangu holds up the sky, it will change 9 times a day and turn into an Dharma that represents my Tao, declaring that I am also part of Pangu's orthodoxy, the orthodoxy of heaven and earth. Finally, when Pangu transforms, the ancestral chi of the river Styx Dharma will participate in the creation of the world. So far, it will turn into a river that runs through heaven and earth, as well as a filthy boundless sea of blood. Pangu has 81 Dharma, so there are only 81 Daozu Chis that create the world. Among them, the 3 pure ones who have proven Pangu are naturally the orthodoxy. The 3 Daozu Chis are the foundation. According to experience, they should be the three qi of origin. In other words, they are the chaotic Taiwu qi, the red chaotic Taiwu qi, and the dark solitary mystic qi. As for the chaotic fiend gods who are not part of the 81 dharma of Pangu, their ancestral qi will be absorbed by the three pure ones' three qi of origin. The three pure ones will use the three qi of origin to accommodate their path, then evolve other ancestral qi and create the world together with the qi of the other great divines of Pangu. When River Styx thought of Buddhism, she could not help but shed tears of sympathy for Sakyamuni. This was a blatant rejection. Without the ancestral qi that represented Buddhism to create the world, which was the source of all postnatal qi, there was no way to trace it back to Buddhism's Tao. If Buddhism wanted to rely on qi for cultivation, they could only rely on qi of purity and light that were inclined towards Buddhism. This meant that the orthodoxy of heaven and earth did not support Buddhism. Since they could not rely on external qi, they could only cultivate their lives. No wonder Buddhism had always emphasized mental cultivation. In the Tai era, Dara could only exist in the state of the innate inextinguishable divine light. When it came to the primordial era, when qi first appeared, everyone would evolve the innate qi and use the ancestral qi to nurture the future chaotic fiend god's true body. River Styx now had to think about what kind of ancestral qi should be nurtured by his Tao. This Daozu qi would be used to create the water cycle of the primitive world and the blood sea, River Styx. Without a doubt, this would be the ancestral qi that would evolve the 7 types of innate true water. It would be accommodated by cult leader Chen's great Tao of Water Fairy. However, River Styx was still the future cult leader of the Devil Path. The ancestral qi of the world of creation needed to be close to heaven and earth and belonged to nature. However, River Styx had to integrate his great Tao of Devil into it and create a chaotic fiend god's dharma that represented the negative energy and water element, the future great devil body of Pangu, a Pangu form that represented the way of the devil god and the great Tao of water element. After extorting a Pangu form from the three pure ones, the future devil path will also be the orthodox force of Pangu. The Pangu god form is the creator of the southern barbarian tribe, so it naturally has traces of the witchcraft cult. The witchcraft cult and devil path are very compatible. In the future, devil path might really be able to worship and cultivate the Pangu demon Venerable's dharma. This time, Hoodoo formed an alliance with 11 powerful mediums and established the Witchcraft Alliance. The witchcraft cult will take root in the witchcraft cult and prove the orthodox Pangu Tao. Although I promised the three pure ones that I wouldn't join, I didn't say that I wouldn't participate. The witchcraft cult and devil path are very complementary. If the 12 witchcraft ancestors succeed in fighting for the orthodox Pangu Tao, then the witchcraft cult will be one of the most orthodox forces of Pangu. The heavenly blessing can compete with the three pure ones' mystic door. Although the witchcraft cult can control humanity, it will definitely be replaced by the 100 schools' mystic door and Buddhism as humanity evolves. At that time, only the orthodox branch of the witchcraft cult, the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, will enter humanity. The rest of the fate energy will disperse and will be absorbed by devil path. Witchcraft is divided into 3 paths, and devil path occupies 1 corner. My 3 fellow Taoists, River Styx sighed hypocritically. I only promised you that I wouldn't join the witchcraft ancestors, but I didn't promise that I wouldn't get involved. For the prosperity of devil path, I have to secretly support Lady Hutu. I believe that my 3 fellow Taoists will understand me. After all, I'm doing this for our devil path. Don't worry, I definitely support Empress Wa's creation. However, I also support the 12 witchcraft ancestors in fighting for the orthodox Pangu Tao. This is the complexity of benefits. My 3 fellow Taoists, you must understand. I won't participate in this round, but my interests must be at stake, River Styx chuckled. He looked at Many Treasures, who was standing in front of him, and felt goosebumps all over his body. He did not know what was wrong. Ancestor River Styx pinched Many Treasure's little face and laughed strangely like a classic villain. This child is fated with our devil path. I'll definitely come and help him in the future. Many Treasures trembled. No fate. We're not fated. You can be Many Treasures' Rulai, but you can't be the Many Treasures' heavenly demon king of our devil path? Don't forget, it was your 3 teachers who allowed me to help the mystic door. Today, whether you're willing or not, hand over one of your incarnations, and I'll let you go. Otherwise, how can you bully others? Many Treasures felt wronged. I'll ask my 3 teachers to judge this. River Styx laughed even more wildly. We're standing at the door of your 3 teachers. If they don't allow it, we would have come out to protect you. Now they're pretending not to see us. Isn't that the same as acquiescing? Your teacher Ling Bao isn't online, and you're not their adopted child. There's no use crying over grievance. Give me one of your incarnations, or I'll use force. Many Treasures pulled a long face and split out a bit of divine light. River Styx grabbed it in his hand and ran away while laughing strangely. I knew you're a clever little devil. You're playing dumb with me. If I use force, you won't be able to keep up the act. Ha ha. Chapter 12:25. Heavenly Lord Yuanyu and Zhao Gongming met a few seniors from Taoism. These celestial venerables of Dara all had strange and ancient faces. They wore elegant hats and were overflowing with Tao Qi. They were all ancient immortals of the mystic door with extraordinary cultivation. It was just that each of them was a little dull. Their appearances were the same as those of the Tai era. They were formed by the connate inextinguishable spirit light, so they could reflect one's heart. River Styx's inextinguishable spirit light was abnormally agile and full of vitality, so it manifested the appearance of a youth. Even ancient powerhouses like Heavenly Lord Yuanshi and Taishang Dao Lord only manifested the appearance of a youth or a middle-aged man. Moreover, their spirit light wasn't twilight. It was only because their statuses were too high that they had to appear more mature. As for the Dara celestial venerables that Zhao Gongming brought Yuanyu to visit, they all had ethereal auras, long eyebrows and long beard. They were full of Tao Qi and immortal Qi, but not human. To Heavenly Lord Yuanyu, they were truly Taoist experts with extraordinary auras. However, after Zhao Gongming left, he sighed. Seniors, your auras are becoming more and more lofty. Yuanyu asked curiously. These celestial venerables of Dara have a deep understanding of the essence of the great Tao. Every move they make is in harmony with the Tao. They are truly like true immortals. Compared to Patriarch River Styx, who shamelessly makes things difficult for juniors, they are so much better. These seniors look more like true immortals of Dara. Why does elder brother sound so regretful? Zhao Gongming said in a low voice. Fellow Taoist Yuanyu, do you remember what I told you about Dara having no tribulations but 3 to worry about? Yuanyu nodded. Patriarch River Styx, forcefully plundering the demonic affinity is a tribulation. The remaining Taoists haven't explained it to me. Zhao Gongming sighed. These are just some twists and turns. They can't hurt our Dara. At most, we'll just be a little embarrassed. What's truly troubling me, Dara, is the trouble of Dara losing me. Fellow Taoist, are you talking about the tribulations of losing me after being severed and forced to become chaotic gods and demons? Patriarch Nether River explained to me that when I first came here, I saw a fellow Taoist who had turned into a connate spirit treasure and was taken in by a Buddhist monk. I brought you to see the 24 celestial venerables of Dara, fellow Taoist Yuanyu. Zhao Gongming reminded him. 24 heavenly venerables of the great heavens. Heavenly Venerable Yuanyu secretly recalled. The inextinguishable spiritual light of the 24 heavenly venerables seemed to faintly connect into one. Their Tao charm was round like a pearl, and there was also a faint clear aura that seemed to contain a world within the spiritual light. He lowered his voice and said with a hint of shock in his tone, "Could those 24 fellow Taoists be the ones behind the 24 sea calming pearls?" Zhao Gongming nodded sadly. "They are my 24 senior brothers." Gongming was fortunate to be fated with senior brothers. With their help, I attained Tao. Although Yuan Yu was prepared, he was still shocked by the truth. Wasn't this numinous treasure? Taoist Randang had achieved the Tao long before me. He had long been friends with the 24 fellow Taoists. However, Master had given me the sea calming pearl. When I had yet to achieve the Tao in my early years, I had relied on this treasure to be rather domineering. Later on, the God-confirmant war had offended Taoist Randang. He snatched the treasure away. Because he was close to my senior brothers, they helped him evolve the 24 heavens. After I escaped, they found an opportunity to return to me. Later, with their help, I attained Dara Dao. Zhao Gongming narrated the cause and effect, his tone containing a hint of warning. If these 24 heavenly venerables of Dara were your senior brothers, wouldn't they be direct disciples of numinous treasure? How could they? Heavenly Venerable Yuan Yu asked in disbelief. That's why Dara lost me. The few senior brothers attained Tao the earliest. They were taken in when the 3 teachers first proved the orthodox Pangu Tao and opened the door. After the world was created, Dara was not as it is now. There were only a few hundred of them, and most of them were ancient gods and savage divine beasts. After the 3 teachers created the world, there were more connate lifeforms and gods formed by the 3 teachers' 3 origins ancestral chi. The 3 teachers took in many disciples in order to expand our Tao. Among them, great heavenly venerable numinous treasure took in the most disciples. Later, some of his disciples stood out and attained Dara Tao. At that time, the congenital conditions of the primordial world were really superior. Pangu was transformed from the 3 teachers, so the essence chi was the most compatible with the 3 pure ones. Dara's conditions for attaining Tao were unique. The few senior brothers attained Tao long before the first tribulation. Later on, I realized that blessings are always accompanied by misfortune. Dara lost me. Firstly, his foundation was destroyed, and he became a chaos godfiend. The chaos godfiend was close to the Tao. Secondly, he lived for too long. He comprehended the great Tao and gradually approached the Tao. The closer he was to the Tao, the further he was from others. His 7 emotions and 6 desires were gradually worn away, and there was nothing he cared about in his heart. For example, the few senior brothers could be said to have already transformed into Tao. Gradually, there was nothing in the world that could move them. For example, the few senior brothers probably only cared about the fate of being master and disciple with teacher. Therefore, they simply turned into connate numinous treasures. With a single thought, they would undergo several tribulations. You saw it too. The connate inextinguishable spirit light of the 24 heavenly venerables of Dara. Although their Tao runes were upright, they lost their spirituality. Therefore, even if their spirituality is not extinguished, they can no longer be considered living beings. The world only knows that my master has the most numinous treasures and that the people of Jie school are the wealthiest. However, they don't know that they are all transformed by my master's disciples. All these years, my master has not been around as the heavenly venerables of numinous treasures. Wasn't it because he was too deeply hurt? The disciples he taught were all Taoists, but they all transformed into Tao before his eyes. Zhao Gongming said with a whimper, "During the God-confirmant war, why was Master the only one who cared about his disciples the most? He didn't even care that some of my junior brothers had shallow foundations." The 12 golden immortals of Chan school laughed at the mixture of good and bad in Jie school. There were no high immortals. When they proved their Tao in Dara, they came to Tai to take a look and stop talking. Master's disciples, Taoists, and Taoists are all here. They turned into connate numinous treasures, plants and rocks. Zhao Gongming said with a trembling voice. Junior brother. Zhao Gongming was a little emotional. The supreme oblivion is an evil Tao. I don't want to see you turn into a connate numinous treasure after a few Pangu eras. Only then did Heavenly Venerables Yuanyu understand why Patriarch River Styx, Patriarch Kuanping, and even Zhao Gongming were so ordinary. It turned out that those who were immortals easily lost their Tao. This was not Dara's tribulation, but Dara's short life was too small compared to the long time and endless life experiences in the future. The mystic door cultivators had a pure heart and few desires, so the tribulation of losing their Tao was worse than that of ordinary Dara. That's why Junior Brother gave one of his incarnations to Patriarch River Styx, which was actually good for him. Although the path of diabolism is extreme and vicious, the 3 scorching poisons can impact Dara's gradually emotionless heart. Without the path of diabolism, the mystic door would be even more like a pool of stagnant water. Zhao Gongming said calmly, Dara schemed and schemed for fun, playing games with each other to help maintain a youthful mentality. Junior Brother, you'll know when you live through a few Pangu eras. The world is born and destroyed a few times, and there are fewer things that matter. We can either scheme against each other and play games with Dara, or we can reenact the origin and return to the time of cultivation, tormenting ourselves even more to strengthen ourselves. I still remember a senior brother telling me that when Taoist Randang had just attained Tao, he was still a Taoist expert. He had always been open-minded, and was the most popular among the 3 pure ones. He had the most friends. Later, his Taoist friends turned into primordial spiritual treasures one by one, and even his Taoist partner turned into a spiritual lamp. At that time, Randang was already on the verge of losing himself. After his Taoist partner passed away, his gradually dying heart was moved. That day, Randang cried for 3 days and built a spiritual coffin for himself. He took the opportunity of the reenactment of the origin to torment himself with all his might. He became the mastermind behind the scenes to prevent himself from attaining Tao. He set up 81 tribulations and more than 1,200 difficulties for himself. It was said that even Master Primordial Beginning could not stand it anymore and secretly helped his past self a few times. Later, after Randang's past proved his Tao, he became like this, despicable, shameless, and full of Taoist appearance. Therefore, Junior Brother Yuanyu, the background of your past proving your Tao is extremely important to resist Dara's loss of yourself. However, you can't let your past become the Tao too easily. If it was easier to become the Tao in the past, you have to obstruct yourself a few more times this time and train your Tao heart in the past. Don't wait until you're on the verge of losing yourself to save yourself. If you use too much force, it'll be easy for you to become a pervert like Taoist Randang. Zhao Gongming warned sincerely. Yuanyu was already stunned. He thought that Dara would be free from the tribulations and be free from then on. It turned out that being free for too long was also a kind of disaster. Indeed, humans are born to be miserable. Is the meaning of life to torment oneself? The 3 calamities of Dara are all tribulations of the evolution of the world. It is also an opportunity for us to resist the loss of myself. Many fellow Taoists will take the initiative to participate in it. Of course, fellow Taoist Yuanyu, you have just achieved the Tao, so don't worry about losing me. At the very least, you will not be tired of living for 3 Pangu tribulations. The beauty of the Tao of Dara is to find the wonders of life. Therefore, Junior Brother Yuanyu, you don't have to be in a hurry to find Patriarch River Styx. You only need to step into the 2nd calamity, the primordial energy tribulation, and the 3rd calamity, the Pangu tribulation. Zhao Gongming continued to explain. I'll start from my 24 senior brothers. Junior Brother Yuanyu, you should know that at the beginning of the world's creation, the primordial energy was the most abundant, the highest quality, the most resources, and the easiest period of cultivation. Many natural spiritual creatures only needed a little cultivation to become immortals. It would not be difficult for them to even step into the threshold of Dara. Why do we still have to shatter the primordial world and constantly evolve the connate primordial energy into the postnatal primordial energy? Even the natural evolution was slightly insufficient, so they initiated all kinds of ancient divine wars, destroyed the world, cut off the spirit veins, and caused the world to shatter and the spirit chi to thin when you cultivated? Yuan Yu's face darkened. Wasn't it all your fault? When he first cultivated, he really had to stick out his buttocks to find a spirit stone. A bit of innate true water could cause a great battle between cultivators. In order to achieve the Tao, he had plundered many worlds, risking the infamy of being scolded by later generations to gather the resources to achieve the Tao. At that time, he secretly swore that if he returned to the primordial era, he would definitely beat the sh*t out of these wantonly wasteful and environmentally destructive bastards. But now it sounded like there were some reasons. Yuan Yu could only suppress his anger and continue listening. This is also a lesson learned by the three masters. When the three masters had just attained Pangu, they chose the best disciples and cultivated many Dara of the immortal Tao in order to expand the mystic door and take advantage of the opportunity of the world's creation and the abundance of primordial energy. At that time they did not see anything, but after the next Pangu era, before the world's creation, the three senior brothers discovered that in the primordial era, when Qi first appeared, each Dara refined their own ancestral Qi. The senior brother who attained the Tao the earliest and was personally taught by the three masters, refined ancestral Qi in a very similar nature. Ancestral Qi is the manifestation of Dara's great Tao. They use Qi to carry the great Tao in the innate inextinguishable spiritual light and refine ancestral Qi that can evolve into primordial energy. This ancestral Qi should be the source of all the principles that Dara comprehended. One Daozu Qi can evolve into a world, and in Dara's hands, he should be able to create a world, a universe that he comprehended. The similarity of ancestral Qi means that their great Tao is similar. In this way, 3,000 Chaos Godfiends have 3,000 great Tao and 3,000 ancestral Qi. But does this primordial world have Chaos Godfiends, great Tao, and ancestral Qi that are completely similar? How can one great Tao have two Chaos Godfiends? One great Tao can only have one ancestral Qi. Therefore, be it the connate 5-direction flags or the 24 oceanic calming pearls, they are all formed from the same connate Dara great Tao. Their inextinguishable spiritual light also originates from the same source. The 24 senior brothers you saw today could not evolve into one ancestral Qi because their great Tao is similar, so they could only assimilate into one ancestral Qi, a Chaos Godfiend. Moreover, the great Tao they comprehended is only the expounding of Master's prime clear Tao. They are destined to be killed by Master and assimilate into the primordial 3 Qi. They are inferior goods among the Chaos Godfiends. The closer they are to their three masters, the closer they are to them. In fact, every time the world is created, they will become one with their three masters and become part of the 3 Qi of mystic, origin, and beginning. The three masters are the manifestations of the great Tao of the three pure ones. Every time they witness their own Tao so clearly, their understanding will naturally deepen, and they will even involuntarily try to understand the great Tao represented by their three masters. With such a great Tao, it is natural that they will lose themselves faster. After Dara, it is the end of Tao. You can only walk your own path. If you want to prove primordial beginning, Taishang Dao, numinous treasure, then with primordial beginning, Taishang Dao, and numinous treasure in front of you, how long can you maintain your sense of self under the great Tao? One of Master Primordial Beginning's favorite disciples achieved primordial beginning after Dara. Now, he is a primordial beginning pearl in Master Primordial Beginning's hand. It is a superior grade primordial numinous treasure, but Master Primordial Beginning rarely uses it. He doesn't even want to look at it, just because he sees the injuries. Every time after the world is created, during the period when the primordial Qi has not disappeared, the three teachers are actually the great Tao imprints of other chaotic godfiends. Although the creation of the great Tao imprints is wonderful for cultivation, this kind of cultivation is to comprehend the Tao of the three teachers and the chaotic godfiends, and to comprehend Pangu. In this way, after Dara achieved Tao, he was imprinted with the great Tao of the three teachers. There will be endless troubles in the future. Later on, the great divines and the three teachers will shatter their great Tao imprints in advance, so that the primordial Qi formed by the primordial three Qi will be continuously transformed into postnatal Qi, and the great Tao of Pangu will be expelled from it. Shattering the primordial world is for your own good. Dara needs to have his own path. Only by shattering the primordial world can you walk your own path. Zhao Gongming pointed at the 24 heavenly venerables of Dara in the 24 sea calming pearls. Otherwise, the outcome of the senior brothers will be your future. You must not prove your Tao in the early stages of the primordial world. At the very least, you have to do it after the heaven mending. It would be best if it was during the Dharma ending era. Among the connate numinous treasures that Dara has transformed into, 90% of them are Dara that has proven their Tao in the primordial world. After the primordial world was destroyed, not even 1 in 100 of them. Junior brother Yuanyu, now you know why there are very few Dara. The primordial world cannot prove its Tao. It is not under the situation where the primordial world is destroyed and the great Tao is not revealed. Those who have tried every means and persevered to prove their Tao will not have a strong self. If not for the fact that after the primordial world was destroyed, countless postnatal living beings who were not affected by the connate great Tao sought the Tao one after another and created an independent great Tao, the Dara that condensed the unique wisdom of these postnatal living beings would not be a complete Dara. Junior brother, you are not the only one who achieved the Tao. There is also the era you are in. Dara is the wisdom of an era. You represent the era of your cultivation, and even the era before that. You are the one who achieved the Tao of Dara by contributing their wisdom to the great Tao. This is the orthodoxy. Junior brother Yuanyu, this is the orthodoxy of the mystic door that you have inherited. Kuanping Patriarch. River Styx called from afar. A spiritual light was running fast in front of him. Kuanping turned his head and said, "Don't chase after him. River Styx, what are you trying to do? I will not join your fiend Tao group." Fellow Taoist Kuanping, my 10-demon great Tao is waiting for you. The 10-demon great Tao was the latest fiend Tao group introduced by River Styx. The first was the heavenly demon, the second was the earth demon, the third was the human demon, the fourth was the ghost demon, the fifth was the celestial demon, the sixth was the yang demon, the seventh was the yin demon, the eighth was the disease demon, the ninth was the demon, and the 10th was the realm demon. This was the fiend Tao set for the mystic door. River Styx was also preparing to introduce another 10-demon set for the Buddhist customers. Annoyance demon, yin demon, heavenly demon, death demon, sin demon, walking demon, karma demon, heart demon, son of heaven demon, and mystic demon. Kuanping Patriarch. Although you are the one who revered Daozu, you are at the bottom of the list. You have not even achieved Pangu. River Styx shouted from behind. Although I am not talented and am just a newbie, I have achieved the level of one of Pangu's 81 Dharma forms. Does Kuanping Patriarch know the reason? Kuanping stopped abruptly. He turned his head and said, "Are you really going to expose me?" River Styx. Others may be afraid of you, but I am not. Why can't I say it? It is not your fault that you achieved Tao too early. River Styx persuaded, Kuanping Patriarch, you are the son of the Chaos Fiend God. Back then, the South Sea Emperor and the North Sea Emperor suddenly opened their 7 orifices for the Central Emperor, which led to the death of Chaos. Because of this, they fought each other and both died, becoming the North Sea and the South Sea. You, Kuanping, were born in the North Sea. You are a giant Kuanping formed from D whose corpse essence. You are an innate fiend god. Later, you realize that you are not complete, only half of it. So, you turned into a Pring and flew to the South Sea. You found half of D whose essence and achieved Tao. You know quite a lot. Kuanping's face was neutral, but he said in a strange tone, but if you know too much, you will die without knowing why. Do you understand? River Styx laughed and said, Kuanping Patriarch, although you are from a noble family, you should know that the untainted land is not a good place to achieve Tao. Moreover, you inherited D whose legacy and achieved Tao. The Tao of Dara's fruit of Tao is too deep. You, a Dara, have nothing of your own. If D who did not suddenly go offline and pass all the karma to you, I am afraid that you will be the first one to lose me in Dara. Yes. Kuanping sneered and said, you post-celestial beings are blessed by nature. After the untainted land is broken, you are no longer affected by the innate great Tao. That is why there are more and more Dara in the human race. Every Pangu era, you dominate the timeline after the untainted land is broken, forcing the other races to hide in the early stage of the innate great Tao of untainted land. How shameless! Kuanping Patriarch, although you developed your own things above Jiu Hu, using the two great Tao to establish your own foundation in balance, you are restricted by the Tao of others. That is why you are the weakest among the patriarchs. In the past, Di Hu and Di Wu were both Panga's images, but you, who inherited their legacy, have not achieved Tao of Pangu. Every time, you need to borrow the Panga's images of Di Hu and Di Hu to become the North Sea and the South Sea. Your Kuanping body inherited Di Hu, and your Peng body inherited Di Wu. But your real self is between the two. It is hard to change. Old Demon River Styx, you have been chasing me for so long. Don't tell me you want to expose me and mock me. Kuanping replied indifferently. You give me the South Sea to develop the great Tao of Ultimate, and I will help you rebuild the Tao of Dara. River Styx proposed a dirty deal. Kuanping said disdainfully, you are just making empty promises. Do you think I should believe you? Who are you? Can you help me rebuild my Tao foundation? I have already told you the answer. River Styx was speechless. The Sea Eye's ultimate is the key to rebuild your Tao foundation. River Styx split the innate inextinguishable divine light into two, one long and one short, two fierce swords. This deal is, I will fight with you. If I win, I will cut off your great Tao of Nanming and turn it into the carrier of the great Tao of Diabolism and the great Tao of Water, the ultimate. If I lose, I will give you the ultimate and rebuild your Tao foundation. All right. Kuanping Patriarch came to his senses. He turned into a giant Peng with a wingspan of 90,000 miles. Patriarch River Styx is indeed frank. Let me add another bet. If I lose, I will split a clone into your Diabolism and become your vice-sect master. Chapter 12:26. Dara had no tribulations. Across the universe, everything was eternally free. The reason why Dara had no tribulations was that Dara existed in all timelines. At the end of the Tai era, the universe was boundless. There was no matter, no ancestral chi, and even no great Tao. Therefore, all laws, techniques, Daos, changes in vital chi, and Dharma powers in the universe could not harm Dara. This was because they were only born after Tai Chu had chi. Tai I was nothing, and Dara was born in the Tai era. Therefore, things that did not exist in the Tai era could not touch the connate inextinguishable spirit light. The connate inextinguishable spirit light was the Tao light of one's true self. It was also the manifestation of Dara's Tao. Therefore, the connate inextinguishable spirit light would not harm each other. Therefore, nothing in the primordial universe could harm Dara. This was the primordial universe's worldview. Even Pangu's mighty ones could not violate their worldview. In other words, this was the primordial universe's rules. River Styx's spirit light split into two and turned into two sword beams. They were also connate numinous treasures, Un2 and Avicii. However, these numinous treasures split from Dara's connate inextinguishable spirit light were still a part of Dara. Therefore, they were different from the numinous treasures formed by Dara. They could not exist independently. Instead, they were a division of Dara's Tao. They could be called accompanying numinous treasures. The primordial Lord of Heaven's three treasures Rui, the numinous treasure mini-sect master of Heaven's Qingping sword, the Taishang world Xian Huang exquisite pagoda, and the Sakyamani's lotus throne were all formed by their own spirit lights. Kunping Patriarch saw River Styx's spirit light split into two swords, but he did not do the same. To him, accompanying numinous treasures were no different from his own spirit light. Instead of splitting them, it was better to return them to himself. He was the son of a chaotic godfiend, a connate godfiend. He was used to supernatural powers and dharma powers belonging to himself. He was different from Dara of the human race, who had a weak body and was used to refining magical treasures and using external objects to fight. To him, his chaotic godfiend body was the most suitable magical treasure. However, there was a reason why the river Styx was divided into two accompanying numinous treasures. For example, Dara, who had a profound foundation, the truth contained in Dara's fruit of way was complete and profound. It involved a wide range of things, as if it was formed from the heavenly Tao of a complete universe. It was slightly inconvenient to use it this way because the Tao of Dara would affect the whole body. His fruit of way was round, so it was difficult for him to use the Tao of killing in his fruit of way flexibly. Therefore, it was necessary to entrust these great Taos to the companion spiritual treasure. Such a numinous treasure entrusted Dara's own great Tao. In the future, it would also participate in the creation of the primordial world and become one of the principles that formed the primordial world. After the primordial era was created, if Dara himself became Pangu, this spirit treasure would be the manifestation of some great Tao. It could be called a pre-world supreme treasure. The three treasures Rui in the hands of the heavenly Lord Yuanshi was the manifestation of the principles of the three treasures of essence, qi, and spirit. After this principle participated in the creation of the primordial world, all connate and postnatal living beings were born with the three treasures in their bodies. From then on, the primordial qi in the living beings' bodies was divided into essence, qi, and spirit. This was the fundamental dharma and logos of the way of immortals that refined essence into qi, refined qi into spirit, and refined spirit into nothingness. All cultivators of the way of immortals relied on the three treasures Rui to cultivate. The three treasures Rui could control the three treasures of essence, qi, and spirit. If a cultivator who cultivated according to the way of refining essence into qi, and spirit was disrespectful to the heavenly Lord Yuanshi, the three treasures Rui could break his Tao foundation. Therefore, this item was the founding treasure of the mystic door orthodoxy. It symbolized that the heavenly Lord Yuanshi was the leader of the mystic door. It was also the embodiment of the authority of the three qis of the mystic door. The Qingping sword was not the founding treasure of the mystic door, but the founding treasure of the Jie sect. It symbolized the principle of interception, so it was the accompanying spiritual treasure of the sect leader of Tongtian, not the accompanying spiritual treasure of the great heavenly Lord Lingbao. At the level of the heavenly Lord Yuanshi, there was no difference whether he had the three treasures Rui or not. He just needed this treasure to entrust the karma of the mystic door. If he wanted to pass on the position of the three venerables of the mystic door, he only needed to give this treasure to a disciple and let him manage the mystic door on his behalf. The Xian Huang exquisite pagoda of the Grand Supreme was a accompanying spiritual treasure that entrusted the Tao of merit, so it was invincible. Unfortunately, the Dara itself was not affected by the Tao and was free from disasters and tribulations, so this treasure was of little value. It only symbolized the transcendence of the mystic door. It was the founding treasure of Taoism. Taoism was also a divine religion, so it needed the Xian Huang exquisite pagoda of the heaven and earth to protect its believers and protect them with the Tao of merit, so that there would be no disasters and tribulations. The two swords, Yuan-Tu and Avicii, which River Styx had transformed into, were also the embodiment of its Tao and entrusted the principle of River Styx. Yuan-Tu was the Tao of killing calamity. He operated the killing calamity and cleared the karma. He held the sword and hovered above the untainted land. Every time the karma was in chaos, the heavenly secrets were entangled, and there were all kinds of contradictions in the operation of heaven and earth. The future of all living beings was in chaos. When the accumulated contradictions affected the operation of the untainted land, the sword of killing calamity would fall and slaughter all living beings. It would set off a boundless tribulation and eliminate all kinds of possibilities of chaos, clearing the world. This killing calamity did not exist in the untainted land before. It started when River Styx proved the Tao of Pangu. It symbolized the River Styx's Tao of natural selection, the survival of the fittest. Therefore, Yuan-Tu's sword of killing calamity was the sword of killing calamity. It was extremely fierce and could kill everything except Dara. The A represented nothingness, and the nose represented the gap. Avicii was the gap, and the Avicii sword was the gap. Originally, the Buddhism established the demonic path as an external path. In order to establish the Tao of truth, they created their own Tao, the demonic path. As a symbol of the unity of Buddhism and demonic, the most bitter Avicii hell was given to the former demonic path's sect master, Demon Ro. Demon Ro established an incarnation, the River Styx sect master, to entrust the Buddhism's karma and became the great Azura sect master. After Demon Ro's karma was given to Chun Ong by the Buddhism of the mystic door, River Styx became independent. The Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords, which had entrusted the demonic path's killing and gap hell, were refined by River Styx with a brand new demonic path's principle. The Avicii sword was called the gap hell, but it was actually the Tao of evolution. It complemented the Yuan-Tu sword's killing tribulation. The heavens' killing tribulation would clear the karma of all living beings. If there was only the Yuan-Tu sword, it would be a continuous reincarnation. Every reincarnation, the primordial world would send a killing tribulation. It was not completely in line with River Styx's Tao. Therefore, River Styx complemented it with the Avicii sword. The Avicii sword was the sword of evolution. It could also be called the sword of heaven's will. Every time there was a killing tribulation, there would be heaven's will high above. If they were united, they would live. If they were not united, they would die. If this sword fell into the hands of other mighty people, it would definitely be the great mediums and the 3,000 Dara who set the heavens will together. However, River Styx hung the heavens will high and eliminated all living beings with the killing tribulation. However, it only operated the general trend. Regardless of individual living beings, those who survived were the true Tao. It did not control the heavens' will and clean up those who did not obey it. Instead, it prevented people from using supernatural powers to go against the general trend and stop the natural evolution of heaven and earth. The last time River Styx met with the three pure ones, it was because of Shang Tianyi. The Taishang used nature and the primeval used the mystic door to restrain the heavens' will sword. Nature was the nature of heaven and earth, the Tao of inaction. The heavens' will existed in nature. If the primordial world was broken, the heavens' will would favor the post-celestial living beings. The killing tribulation would force the connate living beings who breathed in chi of vitality, such as various huge divine beasts and demons, to evolve. The killing tribulation would eliminate these stubborn ones. If the connate living beings became post-celestial, they could survive by killing tribulation. If they did not change their minds, they would face the disaster of extinction. The Tao of nature was to make living beings adhere to the environment. This was also the principle of the celestial Tao of the mystic door. It protected living beings. Therefore, when the survival of living beings was in danger, there would be killing tribulation. Of course, if there were divine beasts such as the Kuanping and the true dragon who were lucky enough to escape the killing tribulation, there would be no need to pursue them. The mystic door was the evolution of Qi of vitality. The primordial world's Qi of vitality would definitely become more and more inclined toward post-celestial. This was the general trend of heaven's will. Even if the pre-celestial living beings protected the environment and preserved the Qi of heaven and earth, they could not reverse this trend. They could only delay it. This was because the Khanate Qi of vitality was not beneficial to the Tao of Dara. After all, heaven's will was the will of Dara, the will of the great mediums. Therefore, once Dara pushed the general trend, there would also be a killing tribulation. Yuantu and Avicii's two swords. The Kuanping founding master watched calmly as River Styx created two swords. He just let them do what they wanted and did not intend to stop them. On one hand, he could not stop them. There was no time in the Tai era. All communication and battles were completed at the same time. It was just like a battle in a time halt. On the other hand, there was no need to stop them. Yuantu and Avicii could not hurt the Khanate inextinguishable spiritual light. Yuantu's sword light was one step ahead. It turned into a rainbow and went around the spiritual light that the Kuanping founding master had transformed into. The Kuanping founding master only sneered and let it do what it wanted. As expected, the sword light landed on the spiritual light and went around it. The Khanate inextinguishable spiritual light did not interact with anything, including itself. What kind of collision could happen when two shadows crossed each other? Therefore, even if River Styx was very powerful, he could only take advantage of the fact that the newbie Dara had just manifested in the Tai era and his spiritual light was shaky. He could only intercept some of the light and shadow. This would not affect the foundation of Dara. When faced with an experienced player like Many Treasures, who had a stable spiritual light, he could only extort and threaten him. However, River Styx was not angry. He laughed and said, "My friend Kuanping, you have fallen into my trap." The Kuanping founding master's expression changed. He felt that in the lower reaches of the chaos timeline, which was his future, a killing tribulation sword and the sword of heavens will suddenly fell on his head. After the chaos timeline was created, to the north of Cheongfa, there was the netherworld sea and the heavenly lake. There was a fish that spanned thousands of miles. No cultivator knew about it. Its name was Kuan. The north underworld was formed by the Tao of Emperor Hu. The great Kuan was born from the Qi of Emperor Hu's death. When the great Kuan was born in the world, it had infinite divine power. It was born knowing that it was an innate demon. When the great Kuan was ignorant, it breathed in and out Qi of vitality and followed the Tao. Above the chaos timeline, the killing tribulation sword and the sword of heavens will hung high. Suddenly, one sword fell. It was the killing tribulation. It fell into the great Kuan's dream. The great Kuan turned into a pring in the dream. It rode the wind and flew to the south underworld. It fell into the south underworld and received the Qi of Emperor Hu. Suddenly, the Qi of the two merged and became the Kuanping. The Kuanping was free in the dream. It had nothing to rely on. In the objective world, everything, including humans, were opposites and interdependent. There was no absolute freedom. This was the Tao of Yin and Yang. The Tao of Xian Buddhism relied on the Tao of demons. Dara's eternity also depended on reality. Everything in the world would not exist if it had nothing to rely on and nothing to restrain it. How could there be absolute freedom? In Dara, was there any absolute freedom without anything to rely on? There was. If one wanted to have nothing to rely on, then one had to have nothing to rely on. Transcend reality and pursue a spiritual world of absolute freedom. This was the Tao of freedom. The great Tao of Zhuangzhou, proving Tao in the dream. Giving up everything in the real world, all fame, and pursuing absolute spiritual freedom in the dream, one would naturally not be stuck in time and space and be unhindered by anything. Not to mention going back to the timeline, even going beyond the timeline would not be a problem. One would be eternally free from calamities and tribulations. The person who achieved such a spiritual state was, of course, Dara. This was the Tao of Zhuangzhou. Everything had nothing to rely on. Everything was right and wrong. Everything was me, life and death. Heaven and earth coexisted with me, and all living things were one with me. It seemed like the simplest and easiest way to prove Dara only needed to have a dream of absolute freedom. But the Kuanping had nothing to rely on in the dream. It cut off its last shackles. After proving Dara, it connected with its Tai Era self and woke up instantly. It was terrified. It struggled out of the dream and scolded angrily, "River Styx, you tricked me again." But it was too late. He had already proved Dara. He returned to the Tai Era in the dream and became a chaotic godfiend. Naturally, he had proved Dara. Zhuangzhou proved Dara by relying on an absolutely high spiritual state. It was not ordinary to be on par with Zhuangzhou. In fact, although Zhuangzhou did not appear often, he was still Jinren Pangu. He dreamed that he became Pangu, so he proved Pangu. Even the three pure ones admired his Tao of Dara. To prove Dara in the dream and pursue a spiritual state of absolute freedom, one had to have nothing to rely on and not be hindered by reality. Zhuangzhou could have nothing to rely on because he had seen through the Tao of materialization in the past. Zhuangzhou dreamed of Hu Dai, a life like Hu Dai. He described himself as Ji He. He did not know Ji He. Suddenly, he realized that he was Ji He. He did not know that Zhou Jimeng was Hu Dai. Hu Dai's dream was Ji He. Zhou and Hu Dai would definitely be separated. This was called materialization. Even if one had absolute freedom in the dream, without anything to rely on, without self and without self, one could still maintain one's true self. This was the state of truly seeing through the separation of self and self. No matter who Zhuangzhou dreamed of, he could maintain his true self. Was this a state that founding master Kuan-Pung could reach? Therefore, when Kuan-Pung was lured into the dream by River Styx and proved Dara in the dream, he instantly lost himself and had nothing to rely on. After proving Dara, he could travel through the past and the future. Of course, he came from the same source as Kuan-Pung in the Tai Era. Now, Kuan-Pung could only use his entire self in the entire timeline to cut off his connection with reality and self-destruct his own self-foundation. At this moment, River Styx chuckled and did not stop him. It was not easy for founding master Kuan-Pung to pull himself back so that he had something to rely on and a foundation. Then, he instantly fell into the state of absolute freedom and fell into Dara. Founding master Kuan-Pung had to reconfirm his origin and return to the beginning of his birth. He had to modify the timeline that River Styx had altered. He even had to go through a few more trials to dispel the influence of Zhuangzhou's Tao. Zhuangzhou's state was too powerful. Kuan-Pung could not afford to offend him. Zhuangzhou could materialize into an Ata, but Kuan-Pung was not that open-minded about self-consciousness. But at this moment, River Styx had already gotten what he wanted. Just now, Kuan-Pung proved his Tao with the body of the Great Kuan. In the dream, the origin of the Great Kuan and Hu emperors merged. The North Underworld moved to the South Underworld and Kuan-Pung proved his Tao at the same time. But outside the dream, the Great Kuan formed from the Great Kuan Emperor's Qi essence was trapped in the North Underworld. River Styx took the opportunity to take the South Underworld away and turned it into the Southern Sea ruins. Although the timeline was restarted by the Kuan-Pung founding master, the material would change, but the Tao would not. River Styx had already used the South Underworld to turn the ruins of End. The Tao of the ruins of End was in his heart. Even if everything was changed back, the Tao itself would not be changed. After Kuan-Pung reconstructed his origin, He saw River Styx smiling at the side with his sword. He was furious. His innate, inextinguishable divine aura stabilized. Only then did he realize that River Styx had stolen a bit of his divine aura when his divine aura was shaking. River Styx smiled. "Founding Master, you have lost. Please join the demon sect." Kuan Pung turned hostile and scolded. "You have already made the first move. You stole a part of my incarnation without even greeting me. Do you think you are respecting me by greeting me now? I stole the divine aura with my own ability. How can it be counted in the bet?" River Styx said shamelessly, "Please, Founding Master Kuan Pung, give me the incarnation that I promised to join the demon sect." Kuan Pung Founding Master was so angry that he was trembling. Shameless, so shameless, however, seeing how River Styx was not ashamed but proud. He knew that this fellow's face was as thick as a primordial treasure. If he refined it, it would not even be comparable to the Book of the Earth. If he continued to fight, it would only be Kuan Peng's face that would be damaged. He could only reluctantly create a bit of divine aura and throw it into River Styx's hand. River Styx made a gesture, sang a promise and left. Now Founding Master Kuan Pung was anxious. If he did not leave, he was afraid that Kuan Pung would fight with him. Fellow Taoist Kuan Pung indeed knows the destiny of heaven. He knows that the demon sect has a chance to prosper, so he came to join us wholeheartedly. I will definitely help him become the demon sect leader and take charge of the world's mutants who join the demon sect. River Styx calculated happily. The biggest destiny of the primitive world is the human race's prosperity. 60% of Dara are humans, and the remaining 20% are entangled with the human race. They are either worshipped as gods or the sect leader of the human emperor, mother, and sect. Whoever dares to stop the human race's prosperity is going against 80% of Dara. They will be beaten to the ground and stepped on by 10,000 feet. I, River Styx, am also a human. However, the human race's prosperity must have a villain. If there are humans, there will naturally be demons. Mystic Door and the Righteous Path will definitely stand on the human race's side. These are all dirty deals. Therefore, the demon sect has to be the villain. I am a human. How can I command the demons to go against the human race? Of course I will sit on the high platform, wield the sword of killing calamity, manipulate the will of heaven, and kill the demons and ghosts until they piss in their pants. This is the classic villain of the demon sect. Kuan Pung, if you don't do it, who will? I have finally crawled out of this teapot. River Styx threw the blame to Kuan Pung and immediately felt relieved. He established the 10 paths and 10 forefathers of the demon sect to throw the blame to others. River Styx wanted to be the judge. Otherwise, wouldn't he be giving the 3 pure ones an advantage if he set up the sword of killing calamity? However, he was stained with the demon sect's karma. He was the demon sect leader. There was no way in this world to be the judge while participating in the battle. Once he entered the game and became the demon sect leader, he would become the person facing the calamity. He would be manipulated by the 3 pure ones. Therefore, he had to be the same as the 3 pure ones and be a chess player. He would use both the righteous and demonic sides as chess pieces to compete with each other. Only by pushing the direct karma related to the demon sect to others could he stand high above and control the sword of killing calamity. He would be free and unfettered, untainted by karma. He counted with his fingers. He had only prepared 5 scapegoats. According to his calculations, he needed about 5 more to completely entrust the karma to the 10 forefathers of the demon sect. However, the 10 forefathers of the demon sect were very useful chess pieces. Of course, the more the better. River Styx put away the sly smile on his face and returned to a calm and detached expression. He looked like a true Taoist and walked toward another newbie that he sensed had just reached the Tao. With the stars in my hand, there is no god like me in the world. With the Yuan-Tu hanging above my head, I am true without being tainted by karma. Fellow Taoist, you and I are fated. Chapter 12:27. Along with Zhao Gongming, he got to know many of Dara's fellow Taoists. Heavenly Lord Yuan Yu found a secluded place with spiritual light and pushed his time to the next moment. However, when time moved, it was already a completely different world. When time was pushed to the next moment, there was a concept of time in the primordial world. The Tai era was no longer there, and there was nothing. The untainted world was also pushed to the next era. At the beginning of time, Qi was seen, there was a kind of ignorant spiritual vigor in the world. Yuan Yu used spiritual light to match the spiritual vigor that sprouted along with the rotation of the universe. A wisp of dense Qi was refined out. It was like smoke and fog, as if it was a mixture of Qi and spiritual light. This dense Qi wrapped around Yuan Yu's fingertip, and it was in a state where yin and yang were not separated. Yuan Yu somehow knew the name of this Qi. Innate Qi. Yuan Yu felt that the wisp of Qi that he nurtured contained the mechanism of yin and yang, 3 talents, 4 symbols, 5 elements and 8 trigrams. As long as it was scattered, it could be transformed into yin and yang and divided into the 5 elements. It was the ancestor of all the Qi in the world. There were countless Qi dynamics in the world, but according to its attributes, it could be classified as 1 yuan, which was 129,600 types of postnatal Qi. With this 1 yuan of postnatal Qi as the foundation, one could trace it back to the pre-celestial and recombine it according to one's own Tao fruit, Dharma and Logos. Then, one could return the postnatal to the pre-celestial and the pre-celestial back to chaos, developing the chaotic ancestral Qi, the innate Qi. Innate Qi, the root of heaven and earth. Yuan Yu fused his innate inextinguishable spiritual light with this Qi. When the spiritual Qi fused, the light of spirituality had a material carrier, and the wisp of Qi had a great Tao to rely on. Instantly, it fused with endless mysteries. Yuan Yu fused with this Qi and felt the wonders of this body. If the body of Dara in the Tai era, the innate inextinguishable spiritual light, was the purity of Tao, then the innate ancestral Qi was the original substance that formed all things in the world. With a wave of his hand, Yuan Yu's ancestral Qi turned into yin and yang Qi. With a single thought, a golden bridge was formed that instantly traversed endless space and time. According to Yuan Yu's memories, this was a mystical treasure that he had refined in order to stabilize the fate of his sect before he attained the Tao of Dara. It was also the first treasure he had seen in his life. The golden bridge could cross time and space to help him travel between the worlds. It could also suppress the wind, earth, water, and fire in the void outside the world. Standing on the golden bridge, not only could he travel between the 4 directions in an instant, he could also temporarily return to the past and the future. Standing on the bridge, all divine arts, wind, fire, and thunder would be like a wave under the bridge. As if he was in an invincible position. Yuan Yu had a secret that he had never mentioned to others. The reason why he could become the only celestial lord to attain the Tao of Dara in the myriad realm and even the countless nearby heavens, and even the reason why he went from being a farmer's son to becoming a Tao lord of the myriad realms, was all because of a golden fragment that he picked up when he was young. That fragment could guide Qi and bring him to travel between space and time. It could even return spirit Qi treasured materials to the state of yin and yang Qi to reconstruct spiritual objects or for his cultivation. It was precisely because of this strange divine art that he could return spirit Qi to the state of yin and yang Qi that he did not lack spirit Qi and resources on his path of cultivation. Later, after he attained the Tao, he used this golden fragment as the foundation to refine the Golden Bridge magic treasure, which was also his natal magic treasure, the Yuan Yu Golden Bridge. Even after attaining the Tao, there was still an indescribable shadow in Yuan Yu's heart. That was the golden fragment that he picked up when he was young. A single fragment could make him a celestial lord of Dara. If that magic treasure was in its complete form, what kind of earth-shattering power would it have? If not for that fragment from yesterday, would he still have the Tao fruit he had today? It was also because of his firm Tao heart that this lingering demonic thought had never been able to disturb his Tao heart. Yuan Yu had strengthened himself several times, and even walked the path of Tao again without the help of the fragment. Only then did he repeatedly slay his inner demons and walk until now. But he still could not dispel that faint wisp of haze. Today, Yuan Yu could not help but laugh out loud when he tried the ancestral qi and was able to derive the complete power of the golden fragment from back then. Even the last bit of haze in his Tao heart dissipated. The golden bridge only existed for 3 breaths before it was crushed by the pressure of the absolute beginning. The yin and yang of the absolute beginning era had yet to be separated, so although the ancestral qi could transform yin and yang qi to derive all kinds of post-celestial creations, it had to withstand the pressure of the entire era. Even with the support of the power of Dara, it could only hold on for a short while. Now, there was qi in the absolute beginning, but the embryonic form of this substance was in a chaotic form. After Yuan Yu's golden bridge was crushed, it returned to the ancestral qi mist that Yuan Yu refined. So this is the embryo of the chaotic demon god that senior brother Zhao Gongming mentioned. Yuan Yu felt that his qi activity was getting stronger and stronger with the germinating spiritual opportunity of the absolute beginning era. The ancestral qi that was originally just a wisp gradually became stronger, although it was still a small ball, and even the color of chaos was faint, but the absolute beginning era had endless time for the vitality to be nurtured. The chaotic demon god is the ancestral qi. Yuan Yu suddenly realized and said, "The absolute beginning, the beginning of qi, has yet to see the form. When the Taisha era and the yin and yang intersect and mix into one, the vitality will take form and become the appearance of the chaotic demon god. When the Taisha era has form and substance, we will have the body of the chaotic demon god and have an infinitely powerful physical body, just like the living beings of the later generations. So, the Battle of Pangu will start in the Taisha era." Yuan Yu's ancestral qi had just formed, and he was extremely happy. Once the vitality was formed, he could naturally sense all the qi activity of heaven and earth. Yuan Yu could first sense that in the absolute beginning, there were 3 all-inclusive, infinitely mysterious qi activities, like the great Tao itself. Yuan Yu only sensed it slightly, and he had an impulse to throw himself into it and merge with it. He was so scared that he quickly stabilized his spiritual light to suppress this compatible qi activity. This should be the ancestral qi of the 3 teachers, the 3 pure ones of the mystic door. Yuan Yu said with some lingering fear, "No wonder so many senior brothers Daos turned into primordial spiritual treasures. We, the disciples of the mystic door, have all comprehended the great Tao of the 3 teachers. Now that the 3 teachers have turned into the 3 qi of the beginning, Yuan and Xian, they are like the source of the great Tao to us. I achieved Tao in the Dharma ending era. At that time, the traces of the 3 teachers' great Tao had already been shattered, but the foundation was inevitably contaminated. That's why I had such an impulse. If it were those senior brothers who comprehended the great Tao of the 3 teachers to achieve Dara, I'm afraid that when they see the teachers, it is like seeing the great Tao. They will involuntarily get closer to the teachers or change to the 3 venerables." Yuan Yu was glad that his great Tao was not pure, mixed with the impurities of self-enlightenment. It was also because of the 3 pure ones that slightly suppressed the purification of various impurities in his vitality. If the 3 pure ones let go, they could instantly refine the self of Dara that was contaminated by the 3 pure Tao, and refine all the disciples and disciples into their incarnations. The primeval Lord of Origin and the Grand Supreme worked together to suppress the primogenitor Lingbao, who only had a little bit of primordial Tao, and had gone offline himself. This was to prevent his qi from refining all the Dara of the Jie school and other Shangqing Tao. Heavenly Lord Yuanshi was surrounded by many primordial spiritual treasures, but there were fewer Taishang. Only Heavenly Lord Lingbao had the most. There were hundreds of primordial spiritual treasures, or Dara, surrounding great Heavenly Lord Lingbao to protect him. Zhao Gongming's 24 senior brothers were also among them. For a moment, countless primordial inextinguishable spiritual light shone brightly. Yuanshi sighed and said, "The light we have been waiting for is still too bright. The light of the great Tao is so dazzling that it will inevitably burn those disciples who are close to us." Taishang looked at Heavenly Lord Lingbao helplessly and said, "Lingbao is still too sad. He did not recover even after several Pangu eras, and this Pangu eras did not come back. When Lingbao ruled the world, his disciples respected him the most, and even their own great Tao followed his qi as the orthodoxy. In the end, the next Pangu eras all died. At that time, Lingbao no longer came to the world with his Tao body, but only the body of Tongtian hierarch. He no longer passed on Lingbao's Tao orthodoxy, but mixed impurities, established the Jie school, and deviated from the path of Tao of his disciples. It's the scheme of those ancient gods. Heavenly Lord Yuanshi's eyes flashed with coldness. If it wasn't for their scheme, how could we have overlooked such a secret? When the ancient gods were the orthodoxy of Pangu, Dara lost his Tao. After the descendants of the ancient gods proved their Tao, the faith and mental power of the natural spirits reshaped their selves. The ancient gods are congenital living beings with strange ideas. They came from Tao and thought that there was no in the congenital world, so they thought that the self was an acquired thought and did not regard the self as their foundation. And the acquired living beings regard the self as their foundation. If they do not regard the self as their thought, it is not important whether they lose me or not. Therefore, there are not many taboos. Every time after the creation of heaven and earth, the ancient gods depart from Tao and return to the state of true self without any thought. Then, the acquired living beings observe all kinds of natural phenomena in heaven and earth, attach their spirits, worship nature, and thus shape the ancient gods' selves. They are born from Tao like babies born to the world, reshaping their self-consciousness. In this way, there is no need to worry about losing me. Every time a pure baby is born, it is born from the taint of the acquired living being's thoughts. After the world is destroyed, it departs from Tao and returns to being a pure baby. This is the Tao of the ancient gods. Therefore, even if there are one or two acquired living beings who achieve Tao, they will be infected by the idea of the ancient gods, dispel the acquired thoughts, wash away their ego, and become an ancient god. Later, when Laozi achieved Tao Dara, he relied on his own self to infect the Tao, causing the two most powerful rule-makers among the ancient gods, Heavenly Lord Yuanshi and Heavenly Lord Lingbao, to be tainted, becoming Heavenly Lord Yuanshi and Heavenly Lord Lingbao. It could be said that he was dragged down by Laozi and shaped his own personality. This personality relied on Laozi's personality and no longer returned to the pure heart of the ancient gods. Therefore, there was the three pristine ones of the mystic door. After the three pristine ones of the mystic door combined, Laozi established the three pristine ones with Tao, and Heavenly Lord Lingbao were the strongest among the ancient gods. Therefore, the three of them easily took over the Pangu orthodoxy and planned to prosper the mystic door in the next Pangu era. At that time, the acquired living beings, Dara, had yet to prosper, and Dara was dominated by the ancient gods. Therefore, the three pristine ones did not have the concept of Dara losing its Tao. This was because the ancient gods were born as pure babies, and the self, which was extremely important to the later generations of Dara, was just an acquired thought to them. Therefore, after the three pristine ones ruled the world and the mystic door flourished, a serious problem arose. The first batch of Dara they cultivated gradually lost itself, and was about to be Tao. If it was allowed to be Tao, it would be born as pure babies and tainted by the self. Then, all of these Dara would become ancient gods. At that time, the acquired living beings, Dara, already knew how precious itself was. It would rather maintain the last bit of obsession in the long period of losing itself and turn into a Tao body with no desires and only the last bit of obsession. It also did not want to be reshaped, tainted, and become a person that it did not know at all. Therefore, it would rather maintain the last bit of emotional obsession and turn into a primordial spiritual treasure to accompany the people who were meaningful to them. In this way, there were primordial spiritual treasures in the untainted land. Most of these people's obsessions were the three teachers who taught them. The obsessions were maintained by both sides. These Dara's obsessions did not disappear even after dozens of Pangu eras. At the same time, they also involved Heavenly Lord Lingbao and Heavenly Lord Lingbao, so that they maintained the distracting thoughts of the acquired living beings and did not return to the body of the Great Tao. Therefore, Heavenly Lord Lingbao and Heavenly Lord Lingbao became more and more like human beings in the Pangu era. Even more ancient gods were involved, and the untainted land entered the era of the acquired living beings. It was also in this era that the self became meaningful and important. The three pure ones suppressed their Tao light because of their acquired feelings. Yuan Yu also felt an inexplicable feeling from afar. There was an extremely important existence to him. It seemed that he had some kind of defect and needed to seize that thing to make up for it. That thing's qi dynamic seemed to be the innate qi. He understood something and immediately turned around, saying, "I still have to ask Senior Brother Gongming." Yuan Yu had locked onto a hint of Zhao Gongming's aura and shifted himself over. That was when he suddenly remembered something, and cold sweat broke out all over his body. The primordial era is not like Tai era. Tai era is nothing, and as long as they don't want to, two Grand Luo would never meet. Even a great divinity like the Nether River Patriarch could only turn his divine aura into an indefinite number, borrowing chance and coincidence to meet them. But now, the Taichu era has Qi, the source of all matter, and time and space. If Patriarch River Styx wants to find them, he only needs to think about it. I have to ask for the blessings of the three teachers, Yuan Yu thought as he went up to Zhao Gongming, who had turned into a ball of Qi dynamic and was nurtured by the Taichu spiritual opportunity. Yuan Yu greeted him, saying, "Senior Brother Gongming, when I was refining Qi in the Taichu era, I felt that the ancestral Qi seemed to be lacking." "Why?" Zhao Gongming frowned, feeling surprised. "Is that so?" The ancestral Qi is the foundation of vitality Qi. It can evolve all vitality Qi. What creates a universe is the Daozu Qi. Therefore, although there are strong and weak ancestral Qi, like the three teachers, which are infinitely mysterious and can be the foundation of the primordial world, there are also some ancestral Qi that can only create smaller worlds and have weak great Dao. However, there are no flaws. If there is a flaw, it cannot become ancestral Qi. Junior brother, you feel that the ancestral Qi is lacking. You must have had a great Dao competition with someone else. Zhao Gongming said, "Although our Dara Dao fruit is complete, it does not mean that our foundation is unique." Patriarch Kuan Pung used the Dao fruits of Emperor Hua and Emperor Hua as his foundation. If the foundation is mixed with someone else's foundation great Dao, the ancestral Qi cultivated will be similar. As such, there is the possibility of it being usurped. The 24 senior brothers in the Sea Calming Pearl have overlapping foundations. Therefore, they can only be combined to refine Daozu Qi. Back then, when I saw that junior brother's spirit light did not sense the other Dara, I knew that junior brother could refine his own ancestral Qi. After all, you have a perfected great Dao. The nature of the ancestral Qi that you refined would not be similar to that of others. Now, from the looks of it, junior brother's Dao foundation still has a trace of someone else's. That is why you can sense it. That person can use that bit of foundation to refine junior brother's ancestral Qi. That way, junior brother will lose his foothold as a chaos godfiend. He can only descend into the world as a connate numinous treasure and wait for an opportunity to shatter the numinous treasure and reincarnate as a living being. Or, he can use the numinous treasure as his main body while his avatar experiences the world. Yuan Yu exclaimed, "It's the golden bridge fragment of the past. Could it be that he can use that to snatch my Tao fruit?" "That's not the case," Zhao Gongming said. "With that bit of foundation, junior brother, when you experience the history of attaining the Tao again in the future, you can change it yourself. It's nothing more than exchanging the opportunities of the past for opportunities that you set up yourself. Dara's Tao fruit cannot be snatched away either. The connate inextinguishable spirit light is indestructible, and there are no calamities or tribulations. It cannot be usurped, but the essence Qi was refined after the Tai epoch. By snatching away your essence Qi, it is equivalent to devouring a chaos godfiend that is still in the process of being born. This way, you will lose the greatest advantage of the Dara game. You will lose your foothold as a chaos godfiend. Of course, junior brother, you can also snatch away his foothold. However, that Dara who has a Tao conflict with you is also a member of my mystic door. Therefore, I can only mediate. I cannot help you protect yourself or snatch away his foothold." Yuan Yu's expression flickered. After thinking for a long while, he cupped his fists and said, "Senior brother, please mediate for me." Zhao Gongming returned the bow and said, "I will do my best. What if that person refuses?" Yuan Yu's face showed determination. "Then we will have to see who is stronger between us." Chapter 12:28. Fantasy World Transmigration. I caught a cold. I'm taking a day off. Currently typing, please wait a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 12:29. Heaven and earth were a void. Chaotic Qi churned and raged. After the absolute silence of the Tai era, the primordial era, which had just begun to see Qi, produced a rather violent Qi of vitality. The 3,000 Dara sensed the heaven and earth and nurtured the ancestral Qi. Heaven and earth were also influenced by Dara and nurtured the chaotic Qi that contained all the ancestral Qi but was not suppressed by the Great Tao. Dara used its own Great Tao to organize the Qi of vitality. Thus, the Great Tao contained within the ancestral Qi was orderly. The chaotic Qi was formed from the 3,000 ancestral Qi. There was no unified Great Tao to control it. Thus, just like the later generation's impression of the chaos, the chaotic Qi was extremely dangerous and terrifying. The ordinary Dara could only be trapped in the chaos. It used its ancestral Qi to suppress the surroundings. The universe and space stirred up all kinds of terrifying spacetime storms. The chaotic Qi sometimes evolved into a chaotic hole that destroyed everything, and sometimes a huge storm. Only the place enveloped by Dara's ancestral Qi was somewhat peaceful. Dara's fruit of Wei extracted connate Qi from the surrounding chaos to nourish its own ancestral Qi. Within the ancestral Qi, there was often a blurry shadow floating. The figure in the Qi of vitality was unstable, but it was slowly inhaling and exhaling the chaotic Qi. Such chaotic embryos could be called fiend gods. They could be found throughout the primordial era. Upon closer inspection, one could see that these fiend gods' embryos were blurry and had yet to take shape. However, this was enough to show that it was the end of the primordial era. The Qi gathered into a form and was about to be nurtured. The chaos had yet to take shape. Everything with form would be eroded and decomposed by the chaos. However, when the 3,000 chaotic fiend gods were born, the chaos would gradually lose its untamable and violent nature under their suppression. It would begin to nurture a physical form. This was the state of the next primordial era. River Styx came to the edge of a huge chaotic storm. In front of him was a huge chaotic hole that stirred the universe and space into chaos. It was like a huge whirlpool that inhaled and exhaled Qi of vitality. River Styx calculated for a while at the edge of the chaotic hole. The chaotic chi was constantly changing. The entire primordial era was in a state of disorder. Other than the 3,000 chaotic fiend gods, there was no fixed benchmark. There was no basis for calculation in such an unpredictable state. Any calculation had to follow certain rules. All calculations were based on grasping the variables and invariant. Using the invariants as the benchmark, one could grasp the variables through the understanding of the laws of change. But in the primal chaos, everything was changing violently without any pattern. Fortunately, there were still some relatively constant things. The 3,000 chaos demons were like 3,000 nails hammered into the chaos, preventing the chaos from changing beyond Dara's control. What Dara needed was Pangu's creation of the world. If there were no constraints in the chaos, all tangible things would not be able to exist. Perhaps the chaos would evolve into the world of the next era on its own. Everything was possible in the chaos, and it was not impossible to suddenly give birth to a god that contained all of the chaos. The absolute beginning era was an era with endless possibilities. Chaos contained everything, but there was no order. With his own invariance as the benchmark, River Styx used the chaos algorithm to create the algorithm model of the huge chaotic hole before him. He then approached the chaotic hole carefully. Uentu and Avicii's sword light slashed at the chaotic hole. The infinite variables collapsed, and the chaotic chi was divided into yin and yang. It was just like Pangu's creation of the world, and the huge chaotic hole collapsed into a black hole. The entire primal chaos shook. The chaos collapsed, and everything that it contained formed a state of order again. The chaotic hole spewed out endless light of the great path, and it opened up an orderly world. A majestic Taoist palace stood in the center of the world, and countless mysterious sounds came from it. It was just like the appearance of the great path. River Styx took a step forward and arrived before the steps of the palace. A Taoist Qing stood beside the door of the palace. He nodded at River Styx and said, "Elder Ancestor, you did not need me to ring the bell to welcome you. You can enter the palace. As expected, you are also a member of the Purple Cloud Palace." When River Styx arrived before the palace, the orderly world was crushed by the primordial era's chaotic sea, and it returned to chaos. It was as if River Styx, the Taoist palace, and the Taoist were crushed by chaos, and they returned to chaotic chi. Then, the huge amount of chaotic chi turned back into the deep chaotic hole. But in reality, chaos contained everything. For example, this Taoist palace was the chaotic divine demons, which was also the place where the great mediums in Dara discussed matters. The great mediums used unimaginable divine powers to open up a Taoist palace that was one with chaos. To an ordinary Dara, this was a chaotic hole. Only the great mediums could open up chaos, find the other world on the other side of chaos, the Purple Cloud Palace, and enter it. It was like someone writing a program in a chaotic system to communicate with each other, Purple Cloud Palace. Of course, this program could not work in a chaotic system, so he messed up the code and turned it into chaotic data. All the communication in the program was chaotic data, and it could not be recognized. Only when someone created the same code from the chaotic data and entered it, and the chaotic system destroyed the program again, could he find the existence of the program, Purple Cloud Palace. But this program still existed, and it could even be used for communication. It was just that everything was hidden in chaos. The name of this Purple Cloud Palace is not very impressive, but the threshold is quite high. River Styx walked up the stairs. Even for the great mediums, there were not many who could find the Purple Cloud Palace in chaos. How could the other great mediums, who did not have the ability of River Styx, enter the palace? They must have been brought in by this Taoist, who stood under the golden bell. River Styx himself was a newbie in Dara. Even with the three Pure Ones' approval, it was difficult for him to convince the great mediums. So he purposely showed off his skills, and it seemed to be working. "I'm River Styx, a newcomer," River Styx said humbly. This is my first time attending a meeting in the Purple Cloud Palace, and I'm not familiar with the way. I hope I'm not late. I'm Guang Qingzi. I've been entrusted by the great mediums in the Purple Cloud Palace to be the bell-receiving messenger. Guang Qingzi smiled. Elder River Styx, please enter. Time cannot be counted in the chaos. Now that the universe is chaotic, there are no laws of time. There are still a few Taoists who have not arrived. Perhaps they were delayed on the way. The 3 teachers are inside. They have been waiting for you for a long time. It's good that you're not late. Otherwise, I'd have to go out and start all over again to adjust the time. River Styx pushed the door open and entered. He saw dozens of dark objects scattered around the hall. There was a swaying green lotus, and beside it was a Bodhi tree that looked like a Buddha. There were also a few dignified bodhisattvas, Taoists, and ancient Buddhas sitting behind it. There were giants lying down, gods and demons in the form of Kuanping and True Dragon. At the top was the 3 Pure Ones sitting side by side. Behind the 3 Pure Ones were many Dara from the mystic door. Most of them were in the form of humans. There were also a few ancient gods and a few emperors. River Styx found a seat in the north and sat down. He looked like a young Taoist, but behind him was a bottomless abyss. It was the Chaos Hole's end. Sitting next to him was a middle-aged Taoist in black. His face was a little thin and sharp, but behind him was a ferocious demon god roaring at the sky. The demon god was full of evil qi and looked at Mingi vaguely with an unfriendly look. However, Mingi didn't seem to notice. He moved the seat under his but closer to him. River Styx moved closer to him and said, Demon Ro, you and I are both Master Demon Daozu. We are colleagues. We should be close. Don't give me that, Luo Ho said with a look of disdain. Who's your colleague? You stole the patriarch of the demonic Tao from me. I don't admit it, do you know that? I don't admit it, and the devil path doesn't admit it either. What is a devil? You're not a devil. You're colluding with the righteous path. You're a traitor of the devil path. The few Daozu Buddhas had a discussion with each other. Sigh. They decided to give my position as the leader of the devil path to someone else. Brother Ro, don't worry. I will definitely make our devil path flourish. River Styx smiled and patted Ro's shoulder. He looked like he had a good relationship with his brother. What do you mean, our and yours? Who is your brother? What do you mean, our devil path? Mine. Devil path. Ro stomped his feet in anger. He pointed at himself and said, It's mine. I was the one who created the devil path. It's all my credit from the beginning. Mine. It has nothing to do with you. These disciples and disciples are all mine. The fate of the devil path is also mine. You can go play by yourself. Brother Ro has contributed to the creation of the devil path. You must not forget that. While Ro was stomping his feet in anger, River Styx had already turned around and started lecturing the devil path's Dara behind him. Master Ro has contributed to the devil path. You must evaluate him properly. Don't forget your roots. Forgetting the history of the devil path is a crime. When the devil path was created, the mystic door's 3 pure ones were powerful. There was also the Buddhist sect Sakya who was restless. Every time they tried to prove their Tao, they would beat the devil path up. Every rising star wanted to step on you and rule the world? It's not that there are no talents in the devil path. However, every time a rising star of the devil path appeared, there would be people from the righteous path who bullied us. It's because we are not united. In this conference, we need to set the rules of the primordial world and set the world view. We, the devil path, must be united and push out the world view of the devil path universe. If we can't be united, we won't be able to fight for our interests in the conference to divide the primordial world. I have a map of the devil path's primordial world here. Come take a look. River Styx's vital chi condensed into an array map and distributed it to the devil path's Dara. The reason why the devil path didn't rise under the leadership of fellow Taoist Ro in the past. It was because we didn't have our base. In other words, we didn't have the heavenly mandate of the devil path. The devil path was shaped as the opposite of the mystic door and the Buddhist sect. It was a tribulation, a difficulty, a foil for them when they reached the Tao. Our whims are all part of their deliberate indulgence. It's a kind of calamity when they recover again. Ever since I became the devil path sect master, I have been reflecting. Does the devil path have a reason to win? We must give ourselves a reason to win, not as a necessary test in the development of things. We must become the inevitable end of the development of things. Therefore, I borrowed the Kuanping ancestral master's Nanming source to create the foundation and home of the devil path in the primordial universe. Ruin of End. River Styx shook the array map in his hand. The array map in the hands of the devil path's Dara evolved into a huge chaos abyss. It was a sea filled with great destruction, and great extinction. The deep sea eye of the ruin of End devoured everything, bringing with it the aura of primordial destruction. Bulsh *T. Ro was so angry that his hands were trembling. This was blatant slander. When he was developing the devil path, Ro had been cautious and conscientious. He had not slacked off for a single day. The devil path couldn't rise because their opponents were too strong. How many of them were at the same level as him? There were 4 who were stronger than him. He couldn't even defeat one of the 3 pure ones. 4 of them had come to bully him, Ro. How could he not feel aggrieved? Now River Styx was in charge. Relying on the opposite side's power, he erased Ro's imprint and credit. He even wanted to steal the foundation of the devil path. Heaven, let him be tyrannical. You're the heaven in vain. Earth, why is the world so unfair? Not only did the 3 pure ones bully him everywhere, but they also extended their hands into the devil path and supported the ancestor River Styx to fight against him. Ro was so angry that he beat his chest and stamped his feet. This was too much. Seeing that Ro was about to pick up his axe and fight with River Styx, the primeval of beginning quickly signaled Guangqingzi to ring the bell. As the golden bell shook, the 4 Taoists stood solemnly. Taishang was the first to speak. It's another Pangu era. During the Taisu tribulation, Pangu was born and killed all the chaotic gods and demons. He gathered the Tao fruits of the 3,000 Dara and created the primitive world again. We, the 3 pure ones, have been Pangu more than 10 times, but we still don't dare to act on our own. Therefore, I invite all Taoists to discuss the laws of the primitive world and determine the future trend. Now, at the end of the Taichu era, there should be the first discussion, to determine the appearance of the primitive world after Pangu created the heaven. The primeval of beginning held the dawn pearl in his hand and shone brightly. Guangqingzi rang the bell 3 times, and the primeval lord of great heavenly lord of beginning made a decision. The first discussion is to determine the heaven. There is a proposal from the Buddhism. There are a total of 28 heavens in the 3 realms. Among them, there are 6 heavens in the desire realm, 18 heavens in the color realm, and 4 heavens in the colorless realm. The mystic door still proposes 36 heavens, and the heaven of Dara is the highest. In addition, there are the 9 heavens proposed by Taoist Di Jun. The first is Zhongtian, the second is Xiantian, the third is Tsongtian, the fourth is Gengtian, the 5th is Qiantian, the 6th is Qiantian, the 7th is Xiantian, the 8th is Shintian, and the 9th is Chengtian. There are also the 9 heavens proposed by Taoist Hong Di. That is, the center is called Great Heaven, the east is called Firmament Heaven, the northeast is called Change Heaven, the north is called Dark Heaven, the northwest is called Dark Heaven, the west is called Hao Heaven, the southwest is called Vermilion Heaven, the south is called Min Heaven, and the winter is called Heaven. There is also Taoist Huda's proposal to use the 4 seasons as the 4 heavens. Spring is Firmament Heaven, summer is Hao Heaven, autumn is Min Heaven, and winter is Heaven. In addition, there is the joint proposal by Taoist Ro and the Buddhist sect. The heavens, dragons, ghosts, deities, constellations, and the underworld are the masters of the 8 directions: up, down, sun, and moon. There are a total of 12 heavens, and the Mahasvara is the highest. There is also the proposal by Great Emperor Ziwei. The starry heavens will be the primordial starry heavens and cover the heavens. Taoist Tai's proposal: the heavens will be one, and there will be no difference in superiority. Taoist Queen Mother of the West's proposal is to use the 36 heavenly spirits as the heavens. There is also the proposal by Taoist Xin Shao. There are 9 heavenly heavens: divine heavens, green heavens, red heavens, bright heavens, jade heavens, blue heavens, purple heavens, and supreme heavens as the heavens. After mentioning the worldviews of the great mediums, there were also some heavenly temples that were not great mediums. The primeval beginning also reminded the great mediums one by one. However, it was impossible for these heavenly temples to become the orthodox primordial world. Only the few heavens above could become the structure of the primordial world in the future. Fellow Taoists, each hold a profound bead and evolve the heavenly realm in the purple cloud palace. If the profound bead falls, you cannot establish your own heavenly realm. The remaining heavenly realms of each heavenly realm will be merged into one heavenly realm. In the future, it will evolve again. It will depend on your fate. The primeval Lord of Heaven gestured for everyone to start voting. River Styx did not have his own proposal. The number of heavenly realms had nothing to do with him. Therefore, it did not matter. The ones who decided the primordial world's heavens were either great forces like the mystic door of the Buddhist sect or the leaders of the Emperor Heaven. The structure of the heavenly realm was very important to them. It was related to who the future Emperor Heaven's position belonged to. However, during the Pangu era, River Styx had no intention of coveting the throne of the Emperor Heaven. He simply used his support to make deals with people everywhere. Chapter 12:30. River Styx watched from the sidelines with an opportunistic attitude. He quietly watched the group of great mystical abilities discuss the Tao and compete. He also took the opportunity to observe the attitudes and relationships of the great mystical abilities of the primordial world. He wanted to prepare in advance for the ultimate universe view that he and the Devil Path would launch later and learn from it. In this primordial world game, no matter how earth-shattering one's mystical abilities were, one could not go against the general trend. The so-called general trend was Dara's democracy. Of course, if one really took Dara's democracy seriously and thought that the general trend of the primordial world was decided by all the Dara, it would be foolish and laughable. Did they not see that those who were not the direct descendants of the great mystical abilities could not even participate in the Purple Cloud Palace's meeting? Dara's democracy was a high-level democracy that had absorbed the essence of the various democracies and learned the lessons of human stupidity. It could be said that they were the people and they were the masters. First of all, democracy was the stage of the great mystical abilities. The primordial world was Dara's game, and also the game of the great mystical abilities. However, in the end, it was still the game of the great mystical abilities. Those who were not great mystical abilities could not hope to step onto the orthodox stage of the primordial world to decide the general trend. The rule of this game was what the heavenly venerables of Dara said. The general trend did not change, and the small trend could be reversed. In River Styx's words, it was, "Don't touch the interests of the big shots. The rest of the remaining interests and dregs will be left to you." When they did not touch the cake of the interest groups, the Dara could still fully enjoy their freedom. The fate of the primordial world was such a general trend. Regardless of whether you were a transmigrator or a zenith heaven who could know the past and future with a single thought, even if you were an outsider from an alternate universe or a god of creation, if you wanted to touch this cake, you had to first see if your body was strong enough. You had to see if you could withstand the pressure of all the opponents in the heavenly discussion and take away the huge fist of the interest groups in the primordial world. Not to mention River Styx, even the three Pure Ones, who had dominated Pangu for dozens of eras, could not withstand the backlash of all the powerful beings when they broke the rules of the game. In fact, because the three Pure Ones had occupied the supreme Pangu for too long, they had accumulated too much karma, and had incurred the wrath of the gods and the resentment of the people. That was why Lady Hoodoo had gathered 12 powerful beings to form the 12 ancestors of witchcraft to compete with the three Pure Ones for the supreme Pangu. Countless powerful beings had secretly taken advantage of the situation and supported them without batting an eyelid. If Gong Gong of the 12 Ancestor Sorcerer Group did not have a conflict of interest with River Styx, River Styx might have sided with Lady Hoodoo and set the three Pure Ones up. However, the Taishang had the foresight to sacrifice a Pangu form and bribe River Styx to not oppose them. Now, River Styx could only stand on the three Pure Ones' side shyly. At the same time, he had to flirt with the Ancestor Sorcerer Group and secretly seduce them. After all, it would not benefit him if the three Pure Ones were powerful. This was called a silent opponent. The Taishang could only bribe his silence, but not his opposition. Even though it seemed like the Buddhist sect and the mystic sect were the most powerful amongst the grand heavenly immortal realms, it was just that these two sects were the hardest to achieve. The Buddhist sect had created their own enclosed ecosystem, and even their world's structure was sealed off. If there was a place within the Buddhist sect, then there would be a place within the Buddhist universe. If there was no place within the Buddhist sect, then there would be no place within the Buddhist worldview. Unless one was subdued to become an outer Tao or a guardian, they would have to bow down to the Buddhist sect. The old demon ancestor, Ro, was forcibly included into the Buddhist sect's closed system after being humiliated by the Buddhist sect many times. He existed as an outer Tao. Speaking of which, he had quite a high status, but which of the great mediums present looked up to him? Speaking of which, the demon ancestor, who was the opposite of the Buddha, seemed to be fighting between good and evil, but in reality, his status in the system was extremely low. Any bodhisattva or Buddha could not give him face. At the end of the day, he was just a tool to show off the Buddhist sect's power. The structure of the Buddhist sect was destined to not be liked by the great mediums. Sakyamuni was also one of the best great mediums in Dara, but he had never come close to Pangu. This showed how much the great mediums rejected the Buddhist sect. Although the mystic door's 36 levels of heaven were stronger than the Buddhist sect, they were not liked for the same reason. The three Pure Ones were too strong. They had reached the point where they would be suppressed by the other great mediums. Moreover, the heaven was not the core interest of the mystic door. The core interest of the mystic door was the three Chi, the primordial universe, the orthodoxy of Pangu, and the three Pure Ones. As for the heaven of the primordial universe, it was the heaven of the future Emperor Heaven's rule over the primordial universe, and it was the source of the Emperor Heaven's destiny. The three Pure Ones of the mystic door were respected and could not establish a second core. If the Emperor Heaven was born, how could he be below others? At that time, in the 36 heavens, the Grand Pure Realm's Great Red Heaven, the Shang Pure Realm's Yu Heaven, and the Jade Pure Realm's Qing Wei Heaven would be high and mighty. Where would the position left for the Emperor Heaven? Could it be that the three Pure Ones were above the Celestial Emperor? Or would they give up the Dara Heaven to the Emperor Heaven and let the Emperor Heaven sit above the three Pure Ones? It was not that the three Pure Ones did not support the Emperor Heaven, but that Emperor Heaven was so strong that it made them feel uncomfortable. The Hongjun Emperor Heaven was a powerful existence that subdued the three Pure Ones. Who was the leader of the Mystic Door? The Mystic Door could not tolerate the Emperor Heaven anymore. Not to mention the others, even the people of the Mystic Door almost beat the brains out of the three Pure Ones' heads. If the Jade Pure Heaven was the highest, the Shang Pure Heaven was the second, and the Grand Pure Heaven was the last, the Grand Supreme in action did not care. But how could the Grand Supreme Dara not care? How could Zhao Gongming not care if the senior brother of the clan of Enlightenment ran above the patriarch of the clan of Jia? Dara of the Mystic Door might not care about his own honor or disgrace, but how many Dara could let go of the honor or disgrace of the patriarch and the sect? Except for Dara, who had turned into a primordial spiritual treasure, no one would not care. Therefore, the Mystic Door's willingness to support their own heaven realm was not firm, and the heaven realm was not their core interest. Most of them wanted to use it as an exchange of interests to divide the support of other powerful divines. The remaining few ideas of the heaven realm were the ones that could really be realized. For example, the 9 heavens realm proposed by Emperor June would divide the talents into 9 levels, and the 9 heavens would dominate the untainted land. The 9 heavens had always been the orthodoxy of the untainted land, which had been established many times in the previous Pangu era. The 9 heavens realm proposed by Shen Shao, a rising star among the powerful divines, was also an alternative variation of this solution. However, Shen Zhao's cultivation was too short, and his foundation was not stable. He would probably integrate his Xian bead into the heaven realm of Emperor June, seeking common ground while reserving differences in exchange for a small concession from Emperor June. At the same time, he would give up coveting the throne of the Emperor of Heaven and become a supporter of Emperor June. Emperor Hong or Emperor Jiang of the 12 ancestors of sorcery, or the 9 fields of heaven proposed by the human sovereign Yellow Emperor Xianyuan, were another way of thinking. The heaven was not divided into high and low, but was divided into 8 central directions, east, west, south, and other 8 directions. At that time, Emperor Hong, who ruled the central great heaven, would be Hongjun, which meant that the Emperor of Heaven who ruled the great heaven would be the Emperor of Heaven, and the other 8 heavens would protect the great heaven, which would be ruled by other emperors of heaven. If someone else became the Emperor of Heaven, of course, he would have to worry about losing power, but Emperor Hong did not have to worry, because his son was also the Emperor of Heaven, his grandson was also the Emperor of Heaven, and his great-grandson was the Emperor of Heaven. The later Emperor of Heaven were all his descendants. The Yellow Emperor was the ancestor of the 5 emperors. Zhuanxu, Emperor Ku, Emperor Yao, Emperor Shun, Emperor Yu, Xian Shao, and Xiaohao were all his descendants, including Dara, who had the potential to become the Emperor of Heaven. Emperor Hong's advantage was that he was the most influential and the strongest Emperor of Heaven. When the other emperors of Heaven ruled, they had to worry about the conflict between the leaders of the human tribe and the Emperor of Heaven after the rise of the human tribe. But Emperor Hong did not need to worry, because the human tribe was his foundation, and the future generations of the human tribe would not have any law or principle to challenge his rule. This was the greatness of the human tribe. But when Emperor Hong set the number of days, there were still obstacles for the future Emperor of Heaven, and the obstacles were quite big. It was hard to say what the other human tribe Dara would think, but the non-human tribe Dara would definitely try to stop it, and the 3 pure ones would not let such a strong Emperor of Heaven ascend the throne. When Emperor Hong ascended the throne, would the Mystic Door or the Emperor of Heaven Hongjun be the rightful ruler of the heaven and earth? 2 Pangu eras ago, the 3 pure ones were suppressed by Emperor Hong, and it was hard enough. At that time, they accidentally let Emperor Hong establish Great Heaven, and then rule the untainted land. In the end, he suppressed them for an entire untainted land era, and they still had a headache when they heard the name Hongjun. River Styx thought carefully, and arranged all the causes and effects clearly. Lady Hudu set up the rotation of the 4 seasons for her own benefit. She wanted the heavenly Tao to follow the earth Tao, and the rotation of the 4 seasons was not constant. This kind of naked proposal to make heaven the vassal of earth is almost impossible to succeed. Dara, who aspires to be the Emperor of Heaven, and Dara, who is subordinate to the Emperor of Heaven, as well as the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors of the human tribe, will not agree. Heaven is higher than earth, heaven is yang and earth is yin. This is the general trend of the untainted land, and it is not something that Hutu can change alone. Looks like Lady Hutu is sick of the method of matching Earth with Heaven and Emperor of Heaven with Hutu. After all, using Heaven to rule Earth during the ancient god era was a symbol of the rise of male gods and the end of the goddess era. Hutu is the Mother Earth god, and she was once Pangu. This proposal is probably a test to elevate Mother Earth to the same position as the Emperor of Heaven. Unfortunately, the era of the Mother Earth god with a snake body of Een is over. Now it is the era of the Heavenly Father Emperor with a dragon body of Yang. Not to mention herself, even Empress Hua, who is subordinate to the Mother Earth god, will not agree to this proposal. As River Styx had expected, the 36 heavens and 33 heavens of the Buddhist sect and the mystic door in the Purple Cloud Palace were quickly suppressed by Dara, who successively threw their Xian bead. Just as they were about to fall into the dust, they were called back by the Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning and Sakyamuni. The Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning did not move, but Sakyamuni had a good temper and was still smiling. It was as if he did not care about being rejected by the orthodox of the untainted land. Next, the Xian bead that Ro and the Buddhist sect had raised was knocked to the ground like trash. Ro was so angry that she scolded loudly. Obviously, the Dara sneered at the ambition of the Buddhist sect and the Devil sect and did not give them any face. The other proposals that were not from the great divine arts were quickly swallowed and swept away. If one did not become a great divine arts, one could forget about being the protagonist of the untainted land. What the great divine arts meant was, you can put forward any suggestions you have. If one is accepted, I will lose. Then there was Shun Zhao's proposal, which was swallowed by the Emperor Jun. The Xian bead was swallowed into the 9 heavens and evolved into the 9 heavens vital energy. The matriarch of the West and the Tai deity worked together to evolve the Chaos Heaven model of the 33 layers of the Big Dipper atmosphere. It could be considered as seeking common ground while reserving differences. The 2 Xian beads also became one sky. As for the Emperor Hong, the Xian bead of the 9 fields in the sky was raised by dozens of Dara together. Its momentum was the strongest. It occupied the center of the hall of the Purple Cloud Palace and evolved into a boundless heaven realm, covering the untainted land. In the center was the Great Heaven, then the Eastern Heaven, the Northeast Changing Heaven, the North Black Heaven, the Northwest Dark Heaven, the West Heaven, the Southwest Vermilion Heaven, the South Fire Heaven, and the Southeast Yang Heaven guarded the Central Heaven. Each of them was ruled by a great emperor. As time passed, the Dara raised the Xian beads in their hands one by one. Most of them landed in the 9 fields, followed by the 9 heavens. Even the Chaos Heaven raised by the matriarch of the West and the Tai deity was suppressed to the side. As the Dara voted one by one, the Dara who did not vote at the scene gradually became conspicuous, especially the demon ancestor River Styx. If he did not put in the Xian bead, the Dara of the demonic path, who was blocked by him, would not dare to stand out. Although Ro's influence was still there, who did not know that River Styx did things without paying attention to the methods he used. These Dara were all threatened by River Styx. They had long been warned not to take sides easily. River Styx was not the kind of righteous gentleman who would not bully the weak. As the matriarch of Nuwa and the Saint Emperor Fuxi jointly raised 2 Xian beads and landed in the Emperor Hong's 9 fields. The Emperor Hong's 9 fields of heaven suppressed the 9 heavens. The matriarch of Nuwa pretended that her hand had slipped, and the Xian bead that represented her tilted with the 9 fields, smashing onto the Chakravarti of Goddess Hutu. Goddess Hutu had a great reputation after all. Although not many Dara threw their Xian beads at her, they had unintentionally provoked her and dropped the Chakravarti of the Chakravarti, humiliating her. Only matriarch Nuwa did not care. Sister Hutu, the heavenly Tao is constant and supreme. How can you change according to the 4 seasons of the primordial world? Furthermore, you are the supreme Mother Earth. Why are you interfering with the matters of the heaven realm? Could it be that you are not enough to fight for Pangu, and you still want to become one with heaven and earth, and become a female emperor of heaven? Because Goddess Hutu was discovered by Mother Earth, virtue and earth, she looked like an amiable woman. Compared to Matriarch Nuwa's image, she looked slightly older. She was infuriated by Matriarch Nuwa's repeated calls of sister. She thought to herself, "You little slut, you have achieved the Tao before me. You are the second Pangu after Torch Dragon, yet your image is so young. You are really shameless." She immediately shouted, "Who are you talking about, sister?" Back then, sister was also from the Een-form lineage of our goddess. When sister was proving Pangu, sister was guided by sister, and thus became Mother Earth. Now, sister doesn't strive for our goddess, instead, you are standing on the side of their male gods. All the goddesses in the world are relying on us to avoid the ups and downs of their boorish male gods. Even if sister doesn't plan for them, why would you betray your birth? Matriarch Nuwa smiled. Their male gods are fighting for power, what does that have to do with our goddess? They can fight for this world if they want to, right? I only care about protecting all living beings. As a mother, of course, I don't care about my children fighting for their futures. As a mother, I just need to support them. Sister, on the other hand, instead of nurturing all living beings, you think about snatching other people's children every day. The smell of gunpowder between the two grew stronger. River Styx and the rest of the humans didn't dare to make a sound. These two were mothers. They couldn't afford to offend them. Of course, they knew why the two mother gods fell out. Wasn't it because of the creation of humans? Hutu and Nuwa were the two mother gods of the human race. It could be said that the human race originated from the earth, and also from the creation of goddess Nuwa. In the beginning, the two mother gods supported the era of the mother gods together, but when the post-celestial beings overthrew the era of the ancient gods, they diverged. Hutu saw all living beings on the earth as her children, treating them all equally. She was endlessly compassionate, be it the post-celestial beings or the post-celestial beings. Goddess Nuwa, on the other hand, wasn't so benevolent. She only loved the descendants she created. Therefore, when the human race was enlightened by the Buddhism of the mystic door and started to rise, the two mother gods' attitudes diverged. Later on, the human race struggled and even sacrificed countless lives to kill off the post-celestial beings, suppressing the post-celestial beings, and standing tall among the primordial races. At that time, Empress Wa, who fully supported the human race, gradually had more influence than Mother Earth Hutu. She even personally transformed into the human race and became the leader of the Huashu family, becoming one of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors of the human race. After that, the legend of Mother Earth creating humans gradually disappeared. In the legend of the creation of the human race, Mother Earth became a handful of soil in the hands of Goddess Nuwa. How could Hutu tolerate this? She took advantage of the fact that the 12 great divine arts practitioners and the 3 clear ones were fighting for Pangu, preparing to create humans on her own. When Empress Wa heard the news, the 2 of them fell out. Even though River Styx promised the 3 clear ones to support Goddess Nuwa in exchange for Fushi giving up the river diagram, he didn't dare to express his stance in front of Hutu. Therefore, after exchanging a few conditions with Di Hong, he raised his Xian bead, wrapped it with a grand luo of the Devil Tao, and threw it into the 9 wild heavens. Immediately, the 9 wild heavens suppressed all the Xian beads and rose up high. It became the orthodox of the heavenly Tao. Supreme One God sighed when he saw the situation and merged his own chaotic heaven into it. After Pangu split open the heaven, the clear air would rise into the heaven and become one. When the Emperor of Heaven was born, he would be in the center and divide the 9 wild heaven and earth, ruling over the primordial world. Di Hong officially occupied the Great Luck and had the upper hand in the fight for the throne in the future. Even if Di Hong hadn't given River Styx the conditions, he would have leaned towards Di Hong. After all, he was the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan, his ancestor. Furthermore, he represented the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors of the human race. The human race was also the biggest interest group in primordial Dara. To put it bluntly, Di Hong, the ancient emperor of heaven, the human sovereign of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, the Yellow Emperor who lived in Xianyuan Hill and built his capital Yoshiong tribe, the Yellow Emperor who had the virtue of earth, the ancestor of humanity, the emperor who controlled the center, the founder of Taoism, the emperors after the human race were the ancestors of my descendants, the Dara who created almost all the surnames. To put it bluntly, all the human Dara present had to call me ancestor. Shennong seemed to have some objections to this. Although it was a bit exaggerated to say that all the human Dara should call him ancestor, it was not excessive for 80% of the human Dara to call him ancestor. Even River Styx and Laozi had to call him ancestor, not to mention the other juniors. Only the Grand Elder severed the relationship with Laozi and was no longer the future incarnation of Laozi, otherwise, he would also come down and call him ancestor. Although Di Hong and Yellow Emperor were not actually the same person, they could be regarded as the same person. They were all sub-accounts of Xianyuan. Even Di Jun was a sub-account of Yellow Emperor 2 Pangu eras ago. It was an era when Xianyuan ruled everything for Hongjun. It was an era that made the 3 pure ones feel ashamed when they thought of it. Di Hong was not surnamed Di and his given name was Hong. Instead, he was a heavenly emperor named Hong. Di Jun was a heavenly emperor named Jun. Those who were preceded by Di were heavenly emperors. Both Di Hong and Di Jun used to be the most ancient world. They were the leaders of the ancient gods during the untainted land. Long before 3 pure ones ruled the world, even before the rise of the human tribe, they were already emperor of heaven. In a sense, they were the representatives of the 2 orthodoxies of emperor of heaven. In the Pangu era, when the ancient gods ruled the world, there was a legend that Di Hong was the son of Di Jun. In fact, it referred to the legend that the orthodoxy of Di Jun, the emperor of heaven, was replaced by Di Hong. Now, Di Jun and Di Hong were not the Di Jun and Di Hong of the ancient gods. After the postnatal creatures overpowered the innate ancient gods, the orthodoxies of Di Jun and Di Hong were taken by Dara. Their former master was in the Purple Cloud Palace. Di Jun was the title of Emperor of Heaven ruled by the Tai God. Di Hong was the title of Emperor of Heaven ruled by the Central Chaos Emperor. Now Di Jun was replaced by Emperor Hao Tian, and the title of Di Hong was given to Yellow Emperor Xianyuan. However, Di Jun and Di Hong still retained some characteristics of the real bodies of the ancient gods. Di Jun had 3 bodies and Di Hong had 4. Chapter 12:31. The great mediums in the Purple Cloud Palace all retained some of the golden legacy of the ancient god era. Shennong had the head of a bull and the body of a human, Emperor Shi had the head of a human and the body of a dragon, Emperor Hua had the body of a human and the body of a snake, Emperor Hong had 4 faces on his head, and Emperor Jun had 3 bodies. The great Emperor of Chaos did not have 7 apertures. This was because during the ancient god era, the appearance of the human race had not become the main dharma form of the Daluo. Torch Dragon was the first Pangu among the ancient gods, so the ancient gods mostly ruled the world with the body of a dragon. Empress Hua was the second leader of the ancient gods. She and Mother Earth, Goddess Hutu, overthrew the era of the dragon god with the body of a snake, ushering in the era of the goddess. In this era, the postnatal living beings, including humans, were created on a large scale. The legend of Goddess Nvaiwa creating humans originated from this. However, Goddess Hutu, who created humans together with Goddess Nvaiwa, was only left with a handful of soil. After Empress Hua, Hutu was also Pangu for a short time. After the era of the goddess ended, Fuxi inherited the era of the dragon god and combined with Goddess Nvaiwa. The two symbolized the change of yin and yang, the mating of the dragon and the snake. Since then, Empress Hua became the symbol of Fuxi's yin side. The era of the goddess ended, and the era of the male god rose. Empress Wa had her own consort and brother, Fuxi. This was also why goddess Hutu was dissatisfied with Empress Wa. She was even more hostile to Fuxi. The era of the male god changed from Fuxi's paternal god to an imperial god. The contamination of the postnatal living beings turned the natural god into an imperial god. The civilization of the postnatal living beings began to influence the ancient god. The Tai god was the first to establish the celestial court and become Pangu as the Emperor Heaven, Emperor June. The position of Emperor Heaven was constantly transferred among the ancient gods. Chaos Emperor, Emperor Shua, Emperor Hua, and other ancient gods became Pangu one after another and began to dominate the eras. The postnatal living beings gradually began to imitate the innate skills of the innate gods because of the intermingling of humans and God. The cultivation civilization began to sprout, the sacrificial class began to develop in the direction of cultivators, and the postnatal living beings gradually became chaotic gods and joined the celestial court. Postnatal lifeforms that had reached the primal chaos godfiend realm were assimilated by the ancient god. With the birth of Laozi, another kind of cultivation ideology different from that of the gods began to sprout. The human race began to rise, and in Laozi's generation, he became the most accomplished. The war between the humans and the gods, the innate lifeforms and the acquired lifeforms engaged in a tragic war. Laozi attained the Tao of the chaotic fiend god, but he wasn't assimilated by the ancient gods. Instead, he used the great Tao that he had comprehended to reverse the reality. The acquired lifeforms, who had been slaughtered by the innate lifeforms and could only struggle to survive under the protection of the great mediums like Emperor Hua and Emperor Shi, began to have their own great mediums. Laozi cut down the Tao, and the Taishang was born from the Tao. The two leaders of the ancient god Zhuoran were the heavenly king of primordial beginning and the heavenly king of Lingbao. The three pure ones were born. After the establishment of the immortal Tao, the ancient gods began to decline. The immortal Tao identified the chaos godfiends as their foundation and defined the chaos godfiends as Dara. The immortal Tao civilization began to pass through its period of obscurity and officially began to develop. The three pure ones and the ancient gods reached a balance, and postnatal lifeforms officially rose to power. The ancient rulers who led the human race in resisting the connate lifeforms all vindicated their Taos. The three pure ones vindicated Pangu and began to support the rulers of the human race, including the leaders of the ancient gods who protected the human race during the ancient god era, and the rulers of the human race who led the human race to resist against the connate lifeforms. They were known as the three sovereigns and five emperors. In the next Pangu era, the three pure ones began to create their own immortal Tao civilization. However, they imitated the path of the ancient gods, causing a major flaw in the path of Dara. Dara, who was a postnatal lifeform, began to lose its Tao. The human race, which tried to occupy the golden age of the primordial great Tao, which had not been broken after the primordial era was established, suffered heavy losses. A human elite from the primordial era turned into a primordial spiritual treasure. Affected by this, the three pure ones no longer directly ruled the primordial era. They established the orthodoxy of the mystic door and educated the immortal Tao Dara. The rulers of the human race, the three sovereigns and five emperors, seized the authority of the primordial era and began to rule the primordial era as the Emperor of Heaven. The hegemony of the human race was initially established. The Buddhism, which had always been a sect rather than a ruler of the primordial era, began to rise among the postnatal lifeforms. The primordial era began to enter the enlightenment of the mystic door and the Buddhism. In the era of the three sovereigns and five emperors, the rulers of the ancient gods also recovered and joined the game of the primordial era. According to the history of the primordial era, river Styx brought in the Dara of the Purple Cloud Palace one by one and analyzed their interests, camps, and attitude. The 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors were the orthodoxy of the human race, and the human race was the overlord of the primordial era, so this was the orthodoxy of the primordial era. The 3 pure ones and the Buddhism were rooted in the human race, but they did not favor only one race, so they could not represent the orthodoxy of the human race. The 3 pure ones were the nobles of Pangu, the orthodoxy of the primordial era. The 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors were the orthodoxy of the human race. As the overlords of the primordial era, the orthodoxy of the human race and the orthodoxy of the primordial era merged, forming the most powerful orthodoxy of the primordial era. However, there were differences of interests among them. Among the 3 pure ones, Lingbao taught everyone without discrimination, and he took the initiative to accept the ancient gods and other postnatal life forms into the mystic door. The primordial era insisted on the civilization of the immortal Tao, which was rooted in the civilization of humanity. Therefore, although the primordial era did not care about one's background, the foreign species under him would be assimilated, or in other words, immortalized. The Taishang did not do anything, but from the perspective of the Dara under the Taishang, they had the highest proportion of the human race. The difference between the orthodoxy of the human race of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors and the mystic door was the conflict of ideas between the races and sections. Generally speaking, the two had the same interest. After all, after so many Pangu eras, conflicts had erupted long ago. Now, the two had entered the stage of living like an old married couple. There were endless small conflicts and bumps, but they could still live together. They were an old married couple. Not only did the mystic door and the human race have conflicts, but even the orthodoxy of the human race also had conflicts. There were also conflicts among the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors. The 3 sovereigns, who protected the human race in the era of the ancient gods and even reincarnated to lead the human race, rose in the war between the connate life forms and the human race, and led the human race to survive through hardships, to victory and rise, and even became one of the founders of the immortal Tao cultivation civilization, the rulers of the human race, the 5 emperors. There were also internal conflict. Most of the 3 sovereigns were ancient gods who cared for the human race. They were the leaders and protectors of the human race during the difficult period of ignorance. The 5 emperors were the power of the human race itself during the time of war. They were the leaders who led the human race to rise during the period of blood and fire. The 3 sovereigns were ancient gods. The 5 emperors were the emperor of heaven. The 3 sovereigns were ancient gods with different ideologies and styles, while the 5 emperors were the emperor of heaven of the Xianyuan bloodline. During the time of war, the human race had to be closely united, so the 5 emperors had Xianyuan of the Emperor Hongdi as the core. The 3 sovereigns and the 5 emperors maintained an unbroken relationship, and together they represented the orthodoxy of the human race. During this complicated period, there was the Pangu era when Emperor Hongdi ruled Great Heaven, the birth of Hongjun, the unification of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, and the orthodoxy of the human race suppressed the mystic door. There was also the situation where the mystic door manipulated the human race, deposed the Emperor of Heaven at every turn, manipulated the human race, and forced the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors to retreat to the fire cloud cave. There was even the revival of the ancient gods, who ruled over all living beings, treated the human race and the 100 races equally, cut off the connection between the earth and heaven, established the rule of the path of gods, and re-established the historical trend. This meant that the primordial world was merging amidst the conflict, entering a historical period of constant conflict, but the general interest was balanced and peaceful. After understanding the history of the Pangu eras before the primordial world, one could understand the current situation. Why did Lady Hudu oppose the 3 pure ones, and why did the Dijiangxi and Yanzi clans of the human race stand on the side of Hutu's witchcraft ancestors? Why did Gomang, Zhurong, Rushu, Gonggong, and Xianming, who had a close relationship with the human race and were worshipped by the human race, join the 12 witchcraft ancestors. Because Hutu was originally the orthodox god of the human race, but because of the problem of choosing sides during the time of war, she was cleverly deprived of the myth of creating humans by Empress Wa. Therefore, the subtle relationship between the human race's orthodoxy and the 3 pure ones, and even the subtle relationship between the 5 emperors and the 3 sovereigns, were the reasons for this subtle situation. Of course, the human race was plotting for the orthodoxy of the primordial world, and the position of the orthodoxy of Pangu. But because of the relationship with the mystic door, this plot had to be restrained to a certain extent, to avoid the 2 sides really falling out. Therefore, the human race and Hutu joined forces to fight for the orthodox position of Pangu, and Hutu's idea of fighting for the myth of creating humans and the karmic title of the Holy Mother was also connived by the 5 emperors. Hutu created the congenital human race with the body of Pangu, so that she could legitimately occupy the golden age of the primordial living beings in the primordial world. The human race also had the primordial origin and foundation, and became the orthodox race of Pangu. After the primordial world was broken, the primordial human race would be transformed into post-celestial beings. In this way, the human race would dominate the entire timeline, and it would not be necessary for the mortal primordial living beings to occupy the historical timeline before the creation of humans, or even before the primordial world was broken, which would bring obstacles to the rise of the human race. Also, it would not give the Tai God and the others a chance to seize the position of Emperor Heaven. But because the myth of the creation of humans belonged to the Holy Mother, Emperor Hong could not say this out. After all, he could not directly stand up and support Hutu to regain the position of the Holy Mother. This was related to the dispute between Empress Enviwa and Hutu. Therefore, the bloodline of the 5 emperors could only rely on Hutu in this secret way. They dared not stand up and support her directly, which would make the bloodline of the 3 emperors lose face. After all, the unity of the human race was still very important. This was the delicate relationship between the 3 emperors, the 5 emperors, the mystic door, and Hutu. It was difficult to see the situation clearly without figuring out the historical problems between them. The key now was the fight between the ancestor of sorcery and the mystic door over the orthodoxy of Pangu, and the fight between Hutu and goddess Nviwa over the myth of creating humans. The ancient gods also had a plan. They did not stand on the side of the human race in the war between the primordial living beings and the post-celestial beings, so the fruits of victory had nothing to do with them. Now, the human race had its own orthodox gods to worship. Tai and Chaos could still maintain their influence, but the ancestral gods of many primordial living beings and the ancient gods who had always stood on the side of the primordial living beings, such as Torch Dragon, were very uncomfortable. However, after the rise of the human race, not only the primordial living beings but also the post-celestial races were oppressed by the human race and their living space was squeezed. The ancient gods were seeking for the union of the primordial living beings and the post-celestial races. Their plan was to let the primordial living beings become the ancestors of the post-celestial races, and the primordial divine beasts and the primordial gods become the ancestors of the other races, completing the union. The reason why the bloodline of the 5 emperors produced the plan of the primordial human race was also related to the overt plot of the ancient gods. The plan of the primordial ancient gods was to create a race that could compete with the human race. This race could only be the union of the 10,000 races of the untainted land. They could only try to solve the complicated conflicts between these races. It was extremely difficult to combine countless races into one, so they had to create a common consciousness of the race. This consciousness could only be to resist the hegemony of the human race. The 10,000 races of the untainted land united. Resist the oppression of the human race together. This was the plan of the demon race. There was no demon race in the world. The demon race was a false concept. There were many different races, and they had complicated relationships and food chains. Were the cows and tigers the same race? Impossible. Therefore, only under the oppression of the human race could these races, which had become the food of the human race and were bullied and enslaved, unite. Humans came first, and then there was the concept of non-humans. Non-humans were rejected and degraded by the human race, and then there was the demon race. Using the hands of the human race to create a demon race that was a union of 10,000 races, this was the plan of the ancient gods. The fuse of the competition between the sorcerers and demons was buried in this meeting in the Purple Cloud Palace. This conflict had long been buried when the human race had been the hegemon. River Styx observed calmly, matching the history of the lower part of the timeline with the current situation. He could see everything clearly from the side. After the competition, one proposal after another was put forward. The untainted land is broken, and the vitality is degraded. There will be 3 major disasters, which will cause the primordial innate vitality to be converted to the post-celestial. The primordial Lord of Heaven knocked on the jade bell in his hand and said, "The first disaster will be the collapse of Mount Bujo. The breaking of the ancestral root of the untainted land is an important part of the general trend." Emperor Hong raised his head, looked at the few pre-world living beings, gave a cold smile, and said, "The untainted land is affected by our great Tao, which is not good for Dara to attain the Tao. Of course, the earlier it breaks, the better. This time, we won't wait for Zhuanshu to ascend to the throne." Gong gong. Emperor Hong pointed at the vanguard of the human race, who had broken the untainted land, and said, "This time, please fight with my friend Zhu Rong and break Mount Bujo." Bulsh *T. Shang Yang stood up angrily and said, "You human beings, don't cross the line. We can tolerate you breaking the untainted land, but you are getting more and more insatiable. Last time, when the humankind rose, you broke Mount Bujo, fine. This time, you want to break Mount Bujo even before the humankind is born. If this goes on, will there be any land left for our descendants to live on? The timeline occupied by us pre-world living beings is only left with the creation of the world. You human beings are still forcing us. We will never allow it." Great sage Shang Yang smashed his cup and shouted angrily. All the Xiantian lifeforms' ancestral gods stood behind great sage Shang Yang. Qingqiu Heavenly Fox asked the ancestral dragon gently, "Great sage Shang Yang, stand up and say something." The ancestral dragon replied lazily, "What? Break Mount Bujo. Isn't that good? If the world floods, my descendants will be able to reproduce for a few more generations. But what if too many places are flooded, and too many pre-world living beings go extinct? What if there is nothing to eat?" The ancestral dragon propped up his head and said, "This is a difficult situation." The group of pre-world living beings almost spewed fire from their eyes. Who didn't know that the ancestral dragon was in cahoots with the humankind? But at this time, he was still a fence-sitter. The ancestral dragon had made a dirty deal with the humankind. The humankind would guarantee the reproduction of the dragonkind in the 4 seas, and give the water to the dragonkind in order to win over the most powerful pre-world living beings. But the ancestral dragon was bought over just like that. Shameless old dragon. Many of the pre-world living beings were cursing in their hearts. "Ha ha ha ha. My friends, why do you have to do this? The primordial world needs tens of thousands of races to prosper together." Seeing that he had angered the pre-world ancient gods, the ancestral dragon stood up and smiled. "Come, my friends, let's have a toast." Behind the ancestral dragon, the Dara of the dragon race, all had unrestrained smiles on their faces. They were all dressed in luxurious clothes and looked extremely rich and powerful. The wealth of the dragonkind was not an exaggeration. The ancestral chi around the Dara of the dragon race formed layers upon layers of palaces. The palaces were so magnificent that the pre-world ancient gods were heartbroken. The dragon kind now no longer had the ferocity and vigor of the strongest pre-world living beings in the past. Their cultivation had long been interrupted during the war with the humankind. Then, they were fed by the humankind with abundant resources and luxuries. Without the support of the dragonkind, the pre-world ancient gods could hardly resist the trend. After a few words of argument, a Xiang Lu great sage said to River Styx in grief and indignation, "Taoist River Styx, when Mount Buzhou falls, your nether blood sea will be the first to suffer. Ancestor, can't you spare a thought for the Azura tribe?" River Styx laughed and said, "Sakya forced the Azura tribe on me, or else I wouldn't want it. You should say this to Taoist Ro. Anyway, I have decided to make Azura a branch of the demonic cult, the great Azura demonic cult. In the future, we still need to cultivate pillars from the humankind. If you want to talk about the spirit of the devil cult, the human race is more in line with it. Greed, obsession, anger, love, hate, affection, hatred, the mortal world, the 7 emotions and 6 desires. They are truly the pillars of our devil cult. A mere Azura clan, low grade, low grade. As for desires and distracting thoughts, how can the pre-world living beings compare to the post-world living beings? A demonic Dara snickered. Mingi remained calm and collected. He was a great divine ability of the human tribe. The ancient gods must be dreaming if they wanted him to support connate life forms. Soon, the motion ended with the complete victory of the humankind. Next was River Styx's proposal. Nanming Ruins of Returning. Chapter 1232. After the chaos was divided, there was the heaven, earth, and water chi, which created human relationships and nourished all living things. Humans followed the same principles. They were known as the Sanjiao and Sandan Tian to nourish the body and generate divine chi. A wisp of Xian Ming ancestral chi flew up from River Styx's head and transformed into a cloud. It landed on the purple cloud palace and began to demonstrate its great Tao of water. River Styx also began to talk about the primordial worldview that he was responsible for. I want to rebuild the water element and create the great water circulation for the primordial world. The primordial Lord of Heaven shook the jade symbols in his hands and said, "My friend, please speak." River Styx's idea was to raise the great Tao of water of the 5 elements in the primordial world to the origin of the heaven, earth, and water universe. Clear chi rose to the sky and turbid chi sank to the ground. Heaven and earth were everything in the primordial world. Only water circulated between heaven and earth to create all changes and life. He wanted to raise his own dharma and obtain status in the primordial world. Originally, water was only one of the 5 elements. River Styx had to compete with Xianming, Gong Gong, and even Kuan Peng, who favored the great Tao of water. Although the 5 elements were the material foundation of the primordial world and one of the origin of the universe, the 5 elements had 5 attributes. It was not as nourishing as the great Tao of 3 elements. Other than the heaven and earth, there was only water. Furthermore, River Styx had other plans. Gong Gong was in charge of the water of the 5 elements, Xian Ming was in charge of the water of the 4 seasons and the water of the moon. Even the water of the mystic door had many Dara from the mystic door. The water of the moon was Wangshu, the water of the wind and rain, the water of the Del cycle of heaven and earth also had the Rain Master, and the water of the 4 seas had the dragon race. There were too many Dara in the water cake. Even if River Styx was the strongest among them, he had to compete with others. He had to snatch Dara from Gong Gong, Xian Ming, Rain Master, and the dragon race. Only then could he occupy the great Tao of water of the primordial world and gain a foothold for himself. And this competition was not limited to this primordial world. It was endless. Until the end of the primordial world, he had to compete with these great Tao players. This is too troublesome. Furthermore, it would be detrimental to River Styx's dignity and dignity. If he got involved in this battle, he would probably lose most of his energy. How would River Styx be able to play games, or cause trouble, happily then? That was why River Styx had long been prepared to transcend the struggle for the great Tao. He would not challenge the existing interest group. Instead, he would expand the pie and break the balance of interests in the primeval world. He would then divert Dara's attention. To put it bluntly, he would not be a barbarian who would recklessly barge into the existing interest group. Instead, through the combination of vertical and horizontal lines, they could affect and disrupt the original structure on a large scale. One was to go to the deep pool alone and be in the center of the vortex. The other was to muddy the entire pool of water in the primordial world so that he could fish in the muddy water. One way was to boldly barge into an unfamiliar place. With the size of River Styx, every move it made would affect the interests of others, and it would suffer from a backlash. The other way was to completely muddy the waters and destroy the original structure. It was to let the twists and turns and make things messy before stepping in. It was obvious which was the better choice. Of course, even if he did this, River Styx would still be drawn into the center of the vortex. However, this time, the vortex was larger, and more people were drawn in. These people would draw in each other, and River Styx would be able to rise above the others. Once he had caught enough fish, River Styx would be confident that he could use his fists to bring his own interests ashore from the muddy water and watch the show instead. Koan Pering had said that River Styx was a sh*t stirrer. It was not an exaggeration. River Styx was now stirring vigorously in the huge sh*t jar that was the primordial worldview. Hearing River Styx's ideas and demonstration, many Dara revealed disgusted expressions. The great Tao of water is the primordial world's great circulation of vitality. To establish the primordial world's metabolism system, one must first establish the great circulation of heaven and earth. Originally, clear and turbid qi were distinct. It was not easy for the qi to remain unchanged and not flow in the world. The clear and turbid qi used the water primordial world as the circulation system, causing the entire qi activity of the primordial world to flow. As the saying goes, when there is air, there will be life, and when there is air, there will be death. River Styx was like an entrepreneur who sold his PowerPoint presentation to investors. He praised his idea of the great Tao of water as if it was a great loss to the primordial world if he did not adopt it. Fortunately, River Styx had real abilities. He was not the kind of entrepreneur who only relied on his mouth to cheat investors, or the Indians in Silicon Valley who only boasted about their achievements. The water primordial world's circulation of heaven and earth was made up of the Milky Way, River Styx, the rivers on the earth, and the eye of the sea in the four seas. These 5 rivers formed the circulation of the primordial world, the interaction of qi activity, and the flow of vitality. Constantly cleaning up the heavy waste in the primordial world made the qi activity of heaven and earth flow more vigorously. The primordial world looked healthier as a whole. It was indeed beneficial to the continuation of the primordial world. But the only problem was, but we don't intend to continue the primordial world. Goddess Empress Enviwa interrupted River Styx's boasting with interest. Great sage Shangyang also sneered and said, "What ancestors said is indeed useful for the continuation of the primordial world. It is also of great help to connate living beings like us, but, ancestor, aren't you a postnatal living being? Ancestor's devil path still needs postnatal humans as pillars." Ancestral Gragon found it interesting. In this way, the primordial world can nourish more living beings. Moreover, after the creation of the world, the primordial world will soon become fertile. In this way, for us dragons, the fertile period will become longer. Ancestral Gragon could not help but swallow his saliva as he thought of the chewy, fat, and delicious beasts after the creation of the world. The primordial world is destined to be broken. Ancestor's idea is not bad, but it is unnecessary to make such a big move for a short-lived connate era. Emperor Hong sat upright. Anyway, the primordial world had to be broken. Anything beneficial to the primordial world was superfluous. Anyway, the human tribe was not suitable to live in the rich Khanate era. The human tribe was used to being poor. Sorry, I'm not used to living in a comfortable place. When Dara attained the Tao, the poorer the better. It would be best if the whole primordial world was barren and unruly. Then, the human tribe could occupy the world. To put it bluntly, Khanate living beings were all trash in the low-level postnatal environment. With a thought from Mingi, the structure of the untainted continent evolved by the water ancestor Qi was broken by an external force. Countless untainted worlds evolved into the myriad heavens and realms, but these countless fragments were still contained in a huge, metaphysical, and integral cycle, forming a brand new world system, the myriad heavens and realms. The specific water element cycle of the primordial world, which connected all parts, was not destroyed with the primordial world. Instead, after the primordial world was broken, it contained all the fragments and continued to maintain a huge universal cycle. On the contrary, Taoist Hongdi, for the primordial world, the water element great cycle was just the icing on the cake. But after the primordial world was broken, this great cycle became even more important. After the primordial world was broken, there were countless worlds, big and small. As Taoist Sakya said, there were 3,000 boundless worlds. Each boundless world had 3,000 medium-class worlds, and each medium-class world had 3,000 small-class worlds. The number of small-class worlds was as numerous as the grains of sand in the Ganges River. In this way, the connection between the fragments of the primordial world was weak, like the corpses of the primordial world. The primordial world was broken to break the great Tao after the creation of the world, to prevent the Tao from contaminating Dara who had attained the Tao. It was to weaken our influence on the new Dara to the greatest extent, so that new chaotic gods and demons could be born and use their great Tao to perfect the primordial world's great Tao. Every primordial world in the Pangu era has been perfecting the great Tao's world evolution system. After the primordial world was broken, countless worlds continued to develop on the basis of the original primordial world, creating new principles. Just like the spiritual root that grew on the corpses of the old primordial world, it absorbed the fragments of our fruit of Tao and bloomed a new flower of cultivation civilization. And Dara was the fruit of this civilization. Then, Dara returned to us and participated in the next creation of the world. In this way, the corpses of the primordial world nourished the civilization of the postnatal creatures, which bloomed the flower of cultivation and bore the fruit of Dara. The fruit of Dara returned to the chaotic gods and demons, creating the world and recreating the primordial world. After the primordial world evolved from the primordial world, countless tiny fragments formed a world ocean that was as numerous as the grains of sand in the Ganges River, the myriad world. These small worlds were relatively isolated, and the myriad world as a whole was hundreds of thousands of times larger than the primordial world. The huge space and the relatively isolated ecosystem gave rise to countless relatively closed world ecosystems, which in turn gave rise to countless famous civilizations of different forms and ideals. Among these civilizations, the luckiest ones, or those that were most affected by the primordial world before it was broken, sprouted the cultivation civilization. Then, in the most splendid cultivation civilizations, flowers of varying sizes, resplendent or dim, blossomed. Among these flowers, only the most brilliant ones could bear a green fruit, which was the embryonic form of Dara. In order to nurture the fruit to ripen, those civilizations had to constantly absorb nutrients from the surrounding worlds and other civilizations. It looked like raising poisonous insects. In the embryonic form of Dara, those Tao lords represented their own cultivation civilization to absorb the nutrients from the nearby fragmented worlds, constantly polishing and absorbing the fruit of Tao of other civilizations. In the end, a perfect fruit was born, and then the spiritual root fell, returning to the primordial world before the creation of the world, becoming the nutrients for the growth of the whole universe. The reason why after the primordial world was broken, the new world system was named the Myriad Worlds by Dara. It wasn't because there were only 10,000 minor worlds, but because there were countless primordial world fragments, and they were constantly being created. The myriad worlds are nothing more than a grain of sand in the realm sea. The reason why the myriad worlds is called the myriad worlds is because when Dara achieved the Tao, it basically had to experience the 10,000 nearby worlds and absorb the principles within them. Only then would it be able to form a Tao fruit that no one had before. On average, 10,000 worlds would be able to produce a single Dara. In reality, however, trillions of worlds might not even be able to produce a single new Tao fruit. Why is there such a huge waste of resources? River Styx gestured. Out of 10,000 primordial world fragments, only one can give rise to a civilization. Only 100 civilizations can give rise to the seeds of cultivation, and the number of grand cultivators who can discover other worlds is less than 1 in 10,000 immortals who can cross the realm sea on their own. Out of 10 billion worlds, only one cultivator will be able to make contact with other worlds. How many of these cultivators will become Dara's seeds? This is the efficiency of using resources in an extensive system. Dara's unique Tao fruit requires an isolated cultivation ecosystem. However, an isolated cultivation ecosystem is not conducive to the growth of Dara. Therefore, we need a new circulation system to connect these isolated worlds in a new way. While maintaining the independent cultivation ecosystem, we can strengthen communication and exchange. This is the great circulation after the primordial world was broken, the great circulation of the myriad worlds. After listening to all of River Styx's ideas, Emperor Hong raised his eyebrows and said, "Interesting. What do you think, Taoist Emperor Shi? After the primordial world was broken, we have always let it go and not interfered. Because there are so many primordial world fragments, anything can happen, and any form of world can be produced. We only need to wait for a large enough sample to produce what we need." Fushi's idea was the chaotic algorithm. The infinite chaotic algorithm would definitely produce the result they wanted. If they interfered with the algorithm so that it was not chaotic, it would be a good thing from the perspective of solving the problem. Human interference could produce more Dara. However, from the perspective of possibility, it was a bad thing. Because the orderly algorithm could never be compared to the infinite possibilities of chaos, interference would definitely destroy some possibilities. For great divines like them, what they wanted was not more grand heavenly immortals, but a more unique Dara, a Dara that contained a more wonderful side of the great Tao. Although there would be more Dara, it would be more unexpected. The possibility of Dara that exceeded their understanding was smaller. Therefore, it was difficult to distinguish the advantages and disadvantages of the two systems. However, at this time, Mingi added from another angle, fellow Taoist Fushi's idea is to change the number of changes. However, the destruction of the primordial world is a fixed number. It is just a small solution to seek change from a fixed number. Now that the primordial world's breaking is fixed, Dara has set the general trend, and there are fewer and fewer variables. And I am the variable of this Pangu era. If fellow Taoists turn me into a fixed number, wouldn't that go against fellow Taoist Fushi's Tao of change? River Styx also persuaded Fushi from the perspective of the chaos algorithm. Fushi's idea was to increase the number of variables in the primordial world, so he opposed River Styx destroying the chaotic algorithm of the primordial world's breaking. However, River Styx refuted him. The primordial world's breaking was already an unchanging state. Due to the coupling of the great mystical abilities and interests, the primordial world's timeline changed less and less. River Styx was the biggest variable in the primordial world this time. His changes to the chaotic algorithm naturally limited the possibility of the Pangu era, but from the reincarnation of the Pangu era, it increased the possibility. This time, River Styx was not allowed to make major changes to the primordial world's history. Even if Fushi protected the post-celestial Dara's chaotic algorithm, there were fewer and fewer variables in the primordial world game. The innate and post-celestial 8 trigrams in Fushi's hands kept crossing and calculating for him. In the end, Fushi nodded and agreed with River Styx's idea of the great circulation of heaven and earth water element. After the primordial world broke, the 3 rivers and the Milky Way broke and became a water net that encompassed all heavens and worlds. In the Purple Cloud Palace, the water ancestor Chi demonstrated the water element circulation that River Styx envisioned. At the top of the 9 heavens pure spiritual Chi, the impurities in the pure Chi sank and condensed into the 9 heavens weak water, which meandered down and became heavier. It passed through the heaven realm and turned into the Milky Way. The Milky Way and the Milky Way merged into the primordial world. During this process, the Milky Way turned into the essence of the sun and the moon, nourishing all living things on the primordial world. What flowed in the primordial world and the 4 seas was the Tiani true water. The Tiani true water was the mother of all water, turning into rivers and seas. The 4 seas circulated through the eye of the sea. After the Tiani true water evaporated, it turned into water cloud. At the same time, it received the weak water from the heaven realm. The weak water was absorbed by the Tiani true water and joined the water cycle on the land through rainfall. The Tiani true water seeped into the strata of the primordial world, constantly washing and cleaning the heavy and turbid Qi in the earth. Under the great pressure and the turbid Qi, it was refined into the first Yuan heavy water. The first Yuan heavy water gathered into an underground river. Because of its weight, it kept seeping downwards and finally flowed into the Yudu city of the underworld. It combined with the impurities in the primordial world and turned into the most filthy and dark Khanate true water, the Blood River true water. Finally, the Blood River true water merged into the Blood Sea. Through the great way of water of ancestor River Styx, it was purified, circulated, and flowed downwards. The Blood Sea and the Blue Sky underworld were 2 sides of the same coin. The filthy Blood River true water that flowed out of the Blood Sea was transformed into the Blue Sky underworld. Through the 9 eye of the spring, it gave birth to the River Styx, which meandered across the land of the underworld. The River Styx washed part of the impurities into the underworld and nurtured the expansion of the underworld. The other part entered the earth and was nurtured and decomposed by the primordial world. Finally, it nourished the spiritual veins in the earth and produced clear spirit Qi again. Rising to the 9 heavens, water was called moist. Dara, who was present, had sharp eyes. With one look, she could tell that the River Styx had hidden something in the water cycle. For example, the 9 types of innate true water. It was obvious that it had been specially created to bribe the community of interest. The River Styx had broken down the functions of the innate great way of water and created 9 types of innate true water with their own characteristics and functions. They were responsible for the water cycle. At the same time, they were also the embodiment of the power of the innate great way of water. It was equivalent to dividing the complete great way of water into 10 powers. It was used to bribe the almighty mediums who had suffered losses in the establishment of the water cycle. At the same time, it created a community of interest. Obviously, the 9 heavens weak water, Tiani true water, and first Yuan heavy water were the embodiment of the downwards characteristic of water. According to the density of the primordial substances, from clear spirit Qi to heavy spirit Qi, the density of the innate true water had to be different in order to continuously permeate downwards. In this process, the impurities in the primordial world were washed away and the overall cycle was established. Therefore, the weak water floated in the clear spirit Qi of the 9 heavens. The heavy water sank in the 9 earthly turbid Qi. the Tiani true water circulated in the primordial world. These three types of innate water were clear spirit water, heavy spirit water, and mother of all water. They shared the water cycle and the power of downwards with the great way of water. They were the innate true water that embodied the characteristics of water. Mastering the 9 heavens weak water would allow one to master the Milky Way. Mastering the first yuan heavy water would allow one to master the earthly river. Mastering the Tiani true water would allow one to master the water cycle in the primordial world. This included the 4 seas, rivers, rain, and even water in the sky. The triple light holy water was the embodiment of the way of water nourishment. By turning the sun, moon, and stars into the triple light holy water and extracting the essence of the sun and moon to nourish the primordial world, it was equivalent to designing a process of water participation in the power of the primordial sun and moon. It could be said that the river Styx was robbing the influence and power of the sun, moon, and stars. However, the river Styx had a sufficient excuse to use the innate true water as a medium to combine the sun and the moon to eliminate the poison of the sun and the coldness of the moon. It turned the originally violent chi of the sun and moon into a gentle atmosphere through the great way of water essence. This was equivalent to creating an atmosphere between the sun and moon as a buffer. Moreover, the river Styx was obviously not prepared to bear this pressure alone. The triple light holy water had existed before, but it had always been regarded as a primordial spiritual item and a treasure of creation. The sun, moon, and stars were the 3 treasures of heaven, and the essence, spirit, and spirit were the 3 treasures of man. The largest source of the triple light holy water was at the heavenly primogenitor's place. It was obvious that the river Styx wanted to give the heavenly primogenitor the power to control the essence of the sun and moon so that the 3 treasures could have one more great way. This was a dirty deal that the river Styx used to try to buy the heavenly primogenitor's support. Similarly, the power of the Tiani true water was given to Gonggong and the ancestral dragon, the 9 heavens weak water was given to the future emperor of heaven, the first yuan heavy water was given to Lady Hutu, and the Xianming true water was the water power of the cycle of the 4 seasons. It was also the cold side of the great way of water essence. Of course, it was given to the Xianming true water to buy his support. The blood river true water was left to him by the river Styx. The blue sky underworld symbolized the great cycle of heaven and earth. It and the blood river true water were 2 sides of the same coin. It was also the power that the river Styx used to meddle with the underworld. When the time came, the underworld and the blood sea were 2 sides of the same coin. The river Styx would be able to meddle with the reincarnation power that Rose River Styx incarnation had tried to meddle with. The time light true water was created for all realms. It was related to the construction of the great cycle of all realms in the future. The last type of innate true water was the virtue clean water. It was also the power that was divided to by the Buddhist sect. The transformation and characteristics of the 9 types of innate true water formed the great cycle of water essence that river Styx had envisioned if the primordial water essence cycle was the 5 rivers and 4 seas. Then after the primordial world was broken, there was only one core of the primordial water essence in all realms, and that was the ultimate,